Conrad Franz from World War One or World War Now. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Danny. It's good to be here. It was an honor to be invited on your show. And again, I've been a big fan. I've watched most Ubi Petrus videos since the first video
Really?
6 years ago. So
Oh my
I have
gosh.
been a long time viewer. So it's good to be here.
Well, it's a tremendous honor to have you on this channel. I was so honored when I reached out and you agreed to come on. We have some really fascinating things to talk about because you are a guy who's into geopolitics, but not just anyone who's into geopolitics. You're specifically into it as it connects with prophecies from Orthodox elders and saints that you believe, and from material I've watched from yours. By the way, material that's heavily shadow banned. YouTube really does not want this stuff getting out. You believe that these apply to, and it appears that they apply to current events. And we're going to get into that. We're going to get into how this applies to the Iran-Israel war, what looks increasingly like a Israel-Turkey war that's coming up, as Israel's been extremely bombastic and aggressive towards Turkey in terms of threats. Um, Potential nuclear winter, if that's even a thing. And then we're gonna start with your story. So, what is your background?
Yeah, sure. So I come from a fairly devout Protestant family. I would say my family would describe themselves like they're kind of the ultimate example of people that are like Christians, not super denominational per se, but we went to church every Sunday. I went to a private Christian school, all these sorts of things. And then I went to university in New York City. And when I went to university, I realized I was still a Christian, had to go to church and everything. So I started going to some of these more non denominational or like lower Presbyterian tier kind of churches. In my family were Calvinist Reformed. So I was visiting a lot of these places in New York, and I realized there's no way I'm waking up every Sunday morning to come to this kind of worship, this kind of thing. So at university, I had to take all these historical theology classes, New Testament, Old Testament. I went to a Christian university and asked one of my professors who I liked, like, where do you go to church? He told me to go to this ACNA Anglican church, started going there for a year. And so I very quickly was like, all right, I need to go to a apostolic high liturgy. Like that's how this works. And so I very quickly realized Anglicanism wasn't the truth. It was between
Yeah.
Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And eventually I started reading a lot. In school I was reading a lot of things that had to do with this. And then I went on the internet, read a lot of books, discovered Father Seraphim Rose, discovered Jay Dyer, who's how I discovered you. And
Oh,
then in
wonderful.
2019, I met Jay Dyer in 2019. He came here, he introduced me to some Orthodox clergy. And then that turned into me meeting one of my old Bible teachers from my middle school days, who is now an Orthodox priest, who ended up becoming my godfather. And so that was in 2019. I became a catechumen. I was received into the church January 2020. So you can imagine what immediately happened after that, about a
Yeah,
month
the
and a
kung
half of
flu.
church attendance. And then next thing you know, I graduated from university. In the midst of all of that, I became a journalist, and I worked for Dr. Steve Turley for a while. If anyone's familiar with him, I ran his
Yeah,
website.
I know
And
Dr. Charlie.
yeah, I ran his website and social media for a while. And then in the midst of that, I started World War Now, the show right now. And you're correct, YouTube heavily shadow banned. So everyone's got to subscribe to the Substack. That's the home base. So the
And
Substack is where we operate.
we're gonna have that Substack linked in the video description. We have a bunch of links in it, and it's quite likely that YouTube will take this down based on what we're talking about. Okay. The other thing I want to say really quickly before we get into more of this is that um, what I'm going to do, because people are complaining about ads, YouTube is only going to promote videos that they can make money off of, and they make their money off of ads. So while these videos air live, I'm not going to have the ads on. Okay. But I have to turn ads on if I want YouTube to promote this. 70% of the views that I get in comes from YouTube promoting my video to people. So if you catch it live, there's no ads. Once the live stream is done, though, I'm turning the ads on. Okay, guys? So that being said, what really quickly, what was it like working for Dr. Turley? Because I used to watch his videos quite a bit. I haven't watched his videos in a few years. I mean, where is he now?
Well, look, I got nothing but nice things to say about Dr. Steve himself. We're good friends. He's an Orthodox Christian, but ultimately, I realized in digital media, a lot of it wasn't really. I mean, I was sort of a content guy. Like I was writing from this conservative, Orthodox Christian kind of perspective. And Steve, he's written a lot of these books about civilization states and the reemergence of older
Nationalism.
world thinking and these sorts of things. And that's what I was interested in. But ultimately, Steve was sort of the main guy doing that. They didn't really need a whole host of other people like they maybe initially thought they did. So it was good. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to the reasons I'll never. Even if there might have been, these days I might have some disagreements with Steve. We don't talk all the time. He sort of stayed on the Trump train in the midst of all this Iran war stuff. So I
Yeah,
and I sort
I've
of
I've heard that.
yeah, and I jumped off, and so he got very into Trump world, like, they were meeting with Don Jr. at one point, I believe, so, like,
Oh,
he was getting really him and his partner were getting really high up into that world, and so I don't think it was my first job out of college. I did it for well over 2.5 years, so it was a good experience, and I'm grateful for
it's
it,
an
and
exciting
I
job.
wouldn't have gotten the opportunity. I've been to Russia 4 or 5 times now since 2023,
Wow.
and and I wouldn't have gotten that initial opportunity if it wasn't for working for Steve. Like, it was sort of through them that, the initial conference that I spoke at, we got connected, and then I sort of went. Steve got invited, he couldn't go, so they sent me. I gave a talk, and it was well received in Russia, so I kept getting invited back.
What not to derail it, but I mean, which major cities have you been to in Russia? And
I've
roughly,
been
like, combined, how long were you there between the 5 trips?
Yeah, yeah. I was in, obviously Moscow is the main place I was. I've been to Sevastopol, where I stayed for several days. I've been to Donetsk. I've been to Mariupol because I spent a lot of this time in the war zone in Ukraine. And I've been to a few areas kind of outside in the periphery of Moscow in the Moscow region. I didn't overnight any of these places, but for example, Zadansk, Sergius Posad, all of these places. I haven't made it to St. Petersburg yet. That's sort of the big one that I haven't been able to hit. But for total, so in the fall semester of 2025, I was there for a total of about 7 weeks, and
Wow,
then in 2023 and 2024, I was there for a combined maybe 3 weeks between the trips,
okay.
4 weeks. So I guess a total of like 2.5 months I spent there, and it's amazing. I mean, it's the biggest Orthodox country in the world, and I think a lot of people say like, "Oh, wow, how did you get there?" It's not that hard to get there. It's not hard to get a visa. You just have to fly through a different country that isn't Europe or America. But yeah, I mean,
Which ones did you fly through?
almost always Istanbul, but 1 or 2 times I
Istanbul's a
did
great
Doha.
city. I've
Yeah,
been there like 6, 7 times. I love it. I lived in
and then
Istanbul for a bit.
no, I've only been to the airport and the areas around it. I need to actually take some time and see more of it. But I flew through
It's
Qatar
3
one time.
weeks. Istanbul is 3 weeks of just nothing but sightseeing and
Mhm.
eating great food. Um, I'd like to go back and make it, I mean, was it 6 times, 7 times, something like that? Make it a 7th or 8th time. Um, okay, excellent. I love this. Okay, so let's get into the meat of this here. The situation with the Iran-Israel war, and I'm trying to look into the camera, not at the screen, because I always like to look at people when I talk to when they're talking, and then it's like, "No, I gotta refocus on the camera." So this war with Israel and Iran, you guys predicted this war was going to start in February, March, and you end up getting a bunch of subs on Substack, which again linked in the video description. How did this play out? How did you guys know this was gonna happen?
Yeah, so again, our show, we sort of the real crux of the analysis, I would say, that sets us apart is we take the prophecies of the Orthodox saints, we know them, we read them, we talk to people in these countries that know them in the original languages, we make sure we have everything sourced and correct, and then we merge that with sort of like a realpolitik, multipolar, realist perspective on geopolitics, which is, we don't, we sort of cut through any kind of bias ideology, what's really happening, who's in power, who's vying for what. And then we basically started to notice, I mean, I started to notice around the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war that a lot of this stuff that these saints in like the mid 20th century or the 90s talked about are happening right now. And when you And when you combine that with the fact that everything that happened with COVID was explicitly prophesied by St. Paisios, who said they will manufacture an illness, there will be a vaccination, it will be a precursor to the mark. When I saw all of that play out as a new Orthodox Christian, I realized I think these noetic juggernauts, these saints, these people that were not PhDs in international studies and these sorts of things have a better of a perspective on geopolitics than a lot of any analyst you'd see on TV, and certainly even a lot of these academic thinkers and even alternative media people. So we actually started the show right after the US blew up the Nord Stream pipeline between Russia and Germany. That was sort of what triggered us to really. I'd gone on a bunch of shows. David Erhan's channel, have some old streams from the very beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war where he had
David
me on to
Allen,
talk
great
about it.
channel.
And yeah, great friend of the show. That's how me and my co-host got connected, was through David. And and so we realized that this was all coming down the pipe when it comes to World War III and Russia, Turkey, as people know St. Paisios talks about. But then people looked into it and we're like, all right, it's not just going to be Russia, Ukraine, it's going to be these other places. And there's the St. Paisios prophecies about how Gaza will be turned into a stadium, basically flattened. We have the prophecies, and then explicitly from Elder Theodore Agiofarangidis in Crete, who reposed in 2016. He said, on that fateful Friday morning, you'll be drinking your morning coffee and you'll see that the Jews struck the nuclear facilities of the Persians. And what happened in June 2025? On Friday morning, the Israelis bombed the nuclear facilities of Iran, and that resulted in Operation Midnight Hammer from Donald Trump. And that basically started us on the cascading effect of the next 6 months, where these fake negotiations that the US and Israel never had no expectations to actually honor. And then next thing you know, on the eve of Purim, the Jewish holiday commemorating the slaughter of the Persian people in the Old Testament, they launched their preemptive attack on Iran in the midst of negotiations, which the U.S. Then joined in. So looking at all those things in November, in July, August of the summer, Dimitri and I were like, yeah, well, this occurred. The prophecies say that after this happens, a bunch of events will start to transpire that have already been foretold much more quickly. So we said, yeah, I think over the next few months and weeks, it's going to turn into this war. And then as we develop through the negotiations into September, November, we're like, yeah, we think March, February 2026 is going to be when this goes off. And we obviously knew about Purim, and we discussed all of that. So it was, the analysis seems to be holding strong. And that's not to say that, we talk all about all sorts of things that aren't prophesied. I mean, there's minutia in every week with geopolitics that wasn't, foretold by St. Paisios. But when it comes to the ongoing wars between Russia, everything that's happening in Russia and Ukraine, everything that happened in Palestine and happening in Lebanon, and now everything that's happening with Iran, it's followed this track of these prophecies that dozens and dozens of saints have said. To now, we're looking at, you mentioned the Turkey-Israel conflict. Israel's rattling the saber against Turkey right now, and the big next thing to drop, the next shoe to drop when it comes to St. Paisios and these other prophecies is the fall of Erdogan himself. And when he falls, I mean, many people are, I mean, you can even see this again, even if you weren't paying attention to the prophecies. Erdogan is sort of keeping Turkey in this very, very protected state. They're straddling the line between NATO and, the multipolar East. They're not actually helping NATO as much as they want on the Black Sea with Russia. They're not helping America versus Iran. But at the same time, Turkey also is bellicose against Greece. They want to move against these Greek islands. They want to do all these things. And Israel is in these strategic partnerships with Greece and Cyprus. So people wonder, how would Turkey invade Greece and Russia invade Turkey? That sounds like the most outlandish nonsense I've ever heard. Well, we're now getting to this point where Israel is threatening all sorts of military actions against Turkey. They're saying that if Turkey builds military bases in Syria, Israel will build military bases in Syria. We remember what triggered in June or in July some of the earliest collapses in negotiations between Iran, and triggering some of the Iranian operations against Israel was the Israeli attempted assassination of the Hamas delegation in Qatar. And when that went down, we know that Israel was basically beginning to target every one of its enemies outside of just Palestine, like they had been doing over the past 2 years since October 7th. And what just happened this past week, Hamas headquarters and leadership has moved from Qatar to Turkey. So let's say Erdogan wants to meet with these people. Let's say Erdogan or something else happens. They're like, well, we're going to strike these people. And next thing you know, Turkey will be basically forced to do some kind of response because everyone in Turkey hates Israel. So even if Erdogan wants to not go to war, even if it's all rhetoric and he wants to maintain peace, the Israelis are not going to let that happen.
And it's important to note that Hamas and Turkey, the was it the AK party in Turkey and Hamas, they're actually the same party. They're the Ikhwan Muslimin, the Islamic Brotherhood, and that was when I lived in Turkey. That was readily acknowledged by Turks. Of course, Muslim, but yeah, I mean, we're just a Turkish wing of it. That's how they see themselves. And to your point about Israel building military bases in southern Syria, right now, and I get like, because my wife is from there, I get like, first person, like updates. Israeli military is everywhere in southern Syria. They've moved in and taken it over. They have absolutely no, and it's the same with like southern Lebanon. They have no intentions of trying to move out. We have this guy at our parish, this Lebanese dude who's kind of one of these like, I don't know. He started going on about how like he really doesn't care what happens in the south of Lebanon because it's not part of his community, and the Israelis are really the friends of the Christians. And I'm just like, he's just kind of one of these like pretty boys who just like says things that he thinks sounds great. And I'm like, he's like, well, Hezbollah is awful. Well, yeah, they are, but do you really think the Israelis are any better? So
Well, it's
all
really
I care about
easy.
is it's just
It's
like,
really
well,
easy to
Habibi, all I care about is my community, ya LB. It's like, oh God, please.
Yeah, all that I mean, that's really easy to say from the diaspora, right? Like it's when Israel's invading Lebanon and you live in America and Hezbollah is the only thing standing between you and rapist soldiers coming to annex your land, then you're probably not going to be indifferent towards what happens to Hezbollah. And look, if people don't know, there's Orthodox Christians that fight with in Hezbollah. So I recognize that it's a Shia militant organization, and I'm not some. I have no interest in ecumenism or any kind of merging of the religious borders with the Muslims. Lebanon has too much religious syncretism as it is between
It's like
intermarriage between the Maronites
13,
and the
some
Orthodox, and
13, 14 sects, something like that.
yeah. And we have Yaqub Sarraf, former defense minister of Lebanon. We have him on our show fairly frequently. Devout Orthodox Christian, regularly visits Mount Athos. Very, very, very pious individual, and he's in his in his when he runs for elections and when he stands, he's part of the resistance coalition, which is with Hezbollah. So there are more Orthodox representatives on that side of the Lebanese parliament than the other side that are with the Sunnis and the Maronites and all these other people who, again, the Sunni prime minister of Lebanon is a puppet of Saudi Arabia, and the Maronites just go along with that, and the Sunnis and whatever the U.S. and Israel want. I mean, Lebanon was supposed to be a much larger country in the south, but the Maronites explicitly cut off a lot of southern Syria because they wanted to be a majority over the Orthodox. Because they're in the
Correct.
actual region, there's more Orthodox Christians than there are Catholics and Maronites. Like in Syria, it's almost entirely Orthodox. In Lebanon, it's majority Maronite because they drew all the borders this way. And I
That's right.
think that
That was the plan. Yeah. They
yeah,
want a
and
Maronite state.
yeah, and the Druze, and you can even I go to an Antiochian parish, a lot of Lebanese friends, and some of them disagree about this. And a lot of Lebanese people that are honest, they're like, look, the Druze and the Maronites are always trying to side with Israel against the Shia and against the people in the south, but it always backfires on them. They side with Israel and the Druze, and then Israel just lets the Druze massacre them and betray in the south and whatnot. So it's never advantageous to side with Israel. It doesn't, like, I am not a pro-Muslim. That is not how this works. But we have to understand Islam is the broom of Israel,
That's
of
right.
these people.
That's right.
They are not as capable of sort of grand strategy as these other people are. It's more of a
Absolutely. They're the
civilizational,
minions.
localized conflict that they're having to wage. And look, I have a lot of respect for the Iranian people and the Iranian regime because of their resistance to all of this. But that doesn't mean that I'm some kind of Shia Muslim. But relating all of this back to the prophecies, I think one of the most fascinating prophecies that you'll hear is from Saint Philomenos of Jacob's Well, who is someone a lot of people I think should familiarize themselves with in the midst of everything that's going on. He was, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar, Danny.
Yes.
Saint Philomenos was martyred in 1979 by radical Zionist Jewish settlers. He was guarding Jacob's Well in the West Bank, the place
And
where Christ
Nablus.
met Saint Photini, and in the scriptures. And he was, the well was raided. He was chopped in the face and had his fingers chopped out by an axe. They chopped his legs off and tried to blow up his monastery with grenades, and that's how he was killed. The mainstream narrative is that it was one like mentally ill guy, but if you read the real accounts, it was four guys. Most of them were never caught by the authorities. It was a whole deal. But right before he died, I believe in 1978, he was leading some pilgrims to some holy sites. They were outside right by Mount Tabor, and he told them, when the Russians descend down in their war against the Turks, they will make it right here to Mount Tabor, the gates of Jerusalem, but no further. And that's what he said right before he passed on. And this coincides a lot with what St. Gabriel or Gabadzi of Georgia said. He says that Georgia would melt like a candle as the Russians descend down into Turkey and Syria to fight the Turks. And listen, you just said Turkey is trying to build their military bases in Syria. Israel bombed those military bases in the midst of the al-Jalani, al-Shara takeover in Syria to prevent Turkey from rehabilitating those military bases. But Israel's crawling in southern Lebanon, like you said. Turkey's trying to build these bases. Who's the country that actually has bases in Syria up until this point, besides, the U.S. having now pulled out in the Kurdish regions? It's Russia. Russia has their bases in Latakia and Tartus. And sure, they're not super
Right along
operational
the
right now. They're
coast.
operating on more of a skeleton crew, but fundamentally, these are, Igor Strelkov, many Russian analysts have talked extensively going years back about how the Turks and other forces that are civilizationally against Russia could trap Russian forces in Syria, and it could lead to a major, major disaster. So again, this is just another one of those examples about how, did Saint Philomenos know anything about, what would the future Assad regime? Was he telling people about geopolitical details, about Baathism? No, but he, in his prophetic vision, God showed him something, and he told, and it was important enough for him to tell the people that he was with that this is going to happen, and some of you may even live to see it. And that's sort of one of the main things that we're looking at right now. Is people say like, oh, well, I come from a Protestant background, I don't want to hear about end times prophecies. Well, this isn't really about the end times. This is about the sort of great, they call it the great slap, I guess, that is sort of descending on the world right now. And the good thing about all of this is, despite all the doom and gloom, many of the prophecies, almost all of them explicitly, are about the spread of orthodoxy coming out of in the midst of all of this. And people can see behind me, I've got my icon of St. John the Third, Dukas Vatatzis, right here, the marble emperor, who is prophesied to have been, since the 13th century, sleeping in a sort of, divine repose state underneath Constantinople, and will eventually, in the midst of the Russo-Turkish War, will emerge in some capacity.
What
So
what is his story?
he was the emperor of Nicaea in the 13th century. For people know, the Fourth Crusade and these other times when the Constantinople was sacked, occupied by the Latins for that brief interregnum period before the fall in 1453. Saint John Vatatzis was the ruler of the main Byzantine successor state, which was the Empire of Nicaea. Almost all of Anatolia and other areas were part of the Empire of Nicaea. There was also the Empire of Epirus, and the few others that were these Christian Greek successor states, while Constantinople was occupied by the Latins. But ultimately, his progeny ended up retaking Constantinople for the final 200 years before 1453. But he's called St. John the Merciful. He's considered one of the greatest Orthodox statesmen to ever live. He wrote, he was resisted Latinizing, was very aggressive against the Pope. He fantastic military leader, and he was said to have never left his plow even while he was the emperor. And he was and he died in his mid 60s, and he's said to be sleeping underneath the city of Constantinople, guarded by these secret Christians somewhere. And you can see in the icon, he has his sword out of the sheath. The prophecies say that, the sword has been slowly being pulled out of its sheath. And apparently in the 1980s, according to the bishop that ordained Elder Ephraim of Philotheo in Arizona to the priesthood, that bishop claims to have seen the marble emperor with his own eyes in the 1980s, and that the sword was almost out of its sheath. So that's the status of that. I know that sounds kind of schizo and crazy to a lot of people, but if you go to Mount Athos, I can assure you, people talk about this stuff all the time.
You've been to Athos, right?
hmm
How many times and for how long?
I've only been once. In 2024, I had the privilege of going. Father Peter Heers took me to Greece, Cyprus, and Mount Athos, and I went to Cyprus, met Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu, met Metropolitan Tychikos right before the persecution against him ramped up, and then we went to Mount Athos for 8 days.
Okay. So what is this about the prophecy about 80 years for Israel?
hmm That's not necessarily, well, St. Paisios does say that 75 to 80 years after the creation of the state of Israel, it will fall in some capacity. And that's not really one of the main focuses here. We'll talk about the temple and everything here in a second, but with the 80-year curse, that's a sort of Jewish prophecy legend that, when it comes to the kingdom of Saul, David, and Solomon, When it comes to the only Jewish kingdoms that have really existed throughout history, they've never lasted more than 80 years. And that's sort of this Jewish fear they have that, you know, once 2028 comes around and it's been that 80 years since the foundation of the Zionist entity, they will something will happen. They will fundamentally change in capacity. They will be destroyed. They will, you know, maybe some hardliners interpret it as, oh, we establish a two-state solution. Oh, we have to recognize these Palestinians' rights. You know, there's all sorts of things that could happen in that regard. But yeah, 80 years, the Israelis really fear that. And I think in talking about, you know, Purim and the dates on which all of these things happen, we were talking about this a bit off stream. Uh, the fall and rebuilding of the third temple on the site of the Temple Mount, where the current Mosque of Omar, the Dome of the Rock is. That is something that a lot of people in Israel have been talking about. You've been in the West Bank and Palestine, you know about this. And thinking about when this war started in February with the U.S. and Israel with Purim, the next Jewish holiday coming up, Tish B'Av, is Wednesday, July 22nd, ending Thursday, July 23rd, which is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, commemorating the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem.
Yes.
So again, with all of this happening, with the 80-year, you know, we're less than 2 years away from the supposed 80 years. We're in the midst of this battle with Iran and the U.S. and potentially Turkey. And now we have, again, this rapidly approaching. We saw just a few months ago, again, we don't know if it was really an Iranian missile or a misfired Israeli air defense, but a massive projectile of some kind hit right next to the Temple Rock, causing extensive damage. And it was just one shot. It wasn't even a major missile or anything like that. So it just shows you, if the shooting starts up again and Israel's getting bombarded, at any moment Israel can decide to blow up the missile got at the Dome of the Rock, got accidentally struck by an Iranian missile, and now we have to rebuild. And now I guess we'll ask the Temple Institute to help us rebuild the third temple. And every few weeks, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, the hardliners in the Israeli government, the radical Zionist settler supporters, they storm the Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount, and do Talmudic rituals. And if people remember, that's what preceded October 7th. October 7th by Hamas was called Al-Aqsa Flood, meaning we are going to saturate Jerusalem and take over, because the week before, Ben-Gvir, again, they did this massive rabbinic storming of the Dome of the Rock and did these rituals that were prefiguring. They're doing the things to set the stage for the eventual building of the third temple. So I think maybe if those guys, those same people that want to rebuild the third temple, take the 80-year curse seriously, then we might see the destruction of the Dome of the Rock sooner rather than later.
Okay, and this is when I was living there, remember, and you mentioned the Temple Institute. Okay, so I toured the Temple Institute, and anyone who thinks that these guys are not trying to rebuild the temple, it's okay. You really need to go tour this. They have remade all, and I mean, well, effectively all of the garments, all of the instruments, everything they need for the temple. They're on display. You can go to this in Jerusalem. I walked in there and they go, well, you're wearing shorts. You can't, come back another time. So I came back and I was fascinated. This is back in 2007. And I just picked this guy's brain for like an hour as I toured this. And he's like, oh yeah, we have the plans over here. Showed me like, they're like mock-up of the plans of what the temple will look like, where the bathrooms, because I was like, I've grown up in construction. I'm like, well, you got like bathrooms, you got like electricity. And they're, oh yeah. And they have it all set up. The only thing that's stopping them right now, it's not the Muslims. Muslims are way too incompetent to stop them. The only thing that's stopping them is that they can't get a red heifer. So now they're looking at genetically modifying a heifer. And all these Pentecostals, these weirdo Pentecostals in Texas are going, I'm sure you live in Texas, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I'm sure you come across a lot of these people. They usually have huge guts and wear cowboy hats. And, they won't take a sip of alcohol because, it's sinful, but they've, 150 extra pounds on their stomach. They're trying to find a red heifer and help out with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely bizarre.
And it's so funny because these people, like, I don't think they even understand their own theology, because it's like in their mind they think the Jews are saved and all this kind of stuff, but it's like they're trying to bring these Christians are trying to bring the Antichrist, and then the Jews will like realize their Messiah is the Antichrist. I don't understand the end game from these very philo-Semitic people who are trying to assist in this endeavor. And I want to read this quote. forgive me, I might censor it a little bit because, I mean, this is one of the most hardcore quotes I've ever read from
You're gonna have
an
to censor
Orthodox.
it because we already accidentally said the R word, the grape word. We got to be really
Yes, yes.
careful because YouTube has shadow banned you, and they're gonna shadow ban due to links in the description, whatnot. So we gotta really be on our best behavior here.
Yes,
But
yes.
yeah, censor however you see necessary.
And again, bringing this all back to, the Orthodox perspective on this and what we think, obviously, the Jewish Messiah is our Antichrist,
Correct.
and that is somebody who, again, will come from the tribe of Dan, which again, Danny and I were talking about this off stream. Where was the tribe of Dan's territory located in the kingdom of Israel? It was in Tel Aviv, the territory of
Yep.
Tel Aviv today.
There you go.
So
There you go.
again, pushing all this together with 80 years, Tish B'Av coming up, the prophecies of St. Paisios, who also says that they will destroy the Dome of the Rock and build the third temple and these sorts of things. It's starting to paint a picture here where this isn't exactly just, oh, the Protestant radio man saying the world ends in 6 years and he's going to be wrong again. This is, in my opinion, the consensus patrum on the time in which we are living in. And again, Metropolitan Theophitos reiterates this extensively. And again, bringing this back to St. John Baptist, because people say like, oh, but you believe in this kingly figure that's going to come. Well, guess who else believes in a Christian kingly figure that will come and persecute the Jews? It is the Jews themselves. They believe in the figure of
Right.
Armilus, basically their version of the Antichrist, like the anti-Jewish Messiah, who will be this imperial figure who will persecute the Jews. And this is a radio interview from Elder Abraham the Athonite, this broadcast in 2015. I'm going to censor one of the words. You can assume what I'm meaning when I say it. It says, as regards the Zionists. That's not what he says, but you can surmise
I
what word
got you.
he's really using. As regards the Zionists, St. Andrew says only this: there will be great zeal, and he will persecute them. From this, it appears that with particular zeal, the Holy King will return to the return of the Jews to Christ, and will mercilessly crush every Zionist who will resist his preaching, and will again prefer unbelief, denial, rather than believing in the gospel of Christ. They will be crushed and will disappear from the face of the earth. And this mirrors, ironically enough, what St. Paisios says will happen actually to Turkey, because when Russia descends down to Turkey, once Turkey, according to St. Paisios, they will close the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits after the fall of Erdogan. They will occupy several Greek islands in the Aegean Sea. And when the Russians try to move their energy or move through those straits, the Turks will reject them. And this will cause Russia to descend down with their military and ultimately liberate Constantinople, which will eventually, at least in some capacity, return to Greek hands. But what does St. Paisios say will happen in the midst of all of this? He says that a third of the Turks will either revert to Christianity, convert to Orthodoxy, will perish in the conflict, and another third of them will basically retreat into what he calls the Red Apple, which is sort of the Turkish homeland in Central Asia. So that is sort of the St. Paisios perspective. So again, many say this as well, that a lot of the Jews will, before the end times, will finally maybe see that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. But those that don't will be the first and ardentest followers of the Antichrist, because the Antichrist will be from the tribe of Dan, ruling from Jerusalem at this third temple that, again, as Danny just said, the plans completely exist. Some say there's rumors that they have the prefab temple completely built somewhere in America or in a different country,
Wouldn't
and are
surprise
just
me at
gonna
all.
and would just bring it in when they need to. Like, why would they be waiting, and why would
Well,
they
and
have a big
they
public
can do
construction?
this. They can do this because they're not gonna be making this out of poured concrete. They're gonna
Hmm.
be making out of stone. So you
Yeah.
can prefab most of it. I mean, and you see
I
if
mean,
you've
look,
ever seen prefab.
Ken Ham replicated the Ark of Noah in Kentucky. You know what I mean? They can do this. You know.
Yeah, if you've ever seen construction prefab things going in, like a prefab shell, I mean, those can go up so quickly. We're talking days. When you really have crews together who know what they're doing, you have everything lined up. You have, what's the term I'm looking for? Logisticians, is that the term? Uh, these things, they go rapidly. You don't have to wait for concrete to dry. Okay. Really quickly, I want to point something out. This on the screen, Oscars505, thank you for posting this. This comment on the screen that's been up, this is the Substack for Conrad for World War Now. Real quickly, I want to take a super chat here. Porphyry Alan, contribution for air conditioning for maintaining Western civilization exile the southwestern deserts. Yes, because right now I'm coming to you from the sometimes cold, usually quite hot, but always fabulous, Las Vegas.
Mm.
Okay, thank you for that $10, Porphyry. Other one, just started watching. Keep up the great work, Ubi. People like to conflate Russia's multi-ethnic society with multiculturalism. After Chechnya too, Putin made it so everyone is Russian first. Doesn't mean it's perfect though. Very good. Thank you so much. We got another one here. We got a new member. Kev Phillip became a YouTube member. You guys, when you become YouTube members on this channel, you have access to all the premium content that I create. I put out one members only documentary each month. On top of it, I'm teaching Latin, Greek, and Syriac. Syriac is Aramaic. It's classical Aramaic. I'm teaching that on Fridays. It's weekly. It's available only to the members on Patreon and YouTube. I actually prefer you go to Patreon. The link is in the video description. Conrad, do you have a Patreon?
No Patreon, but Substack has a paywall. That's our main income source. Is we do a weekly show, World War Now, which is just world news analysis for free every week. And then we have that show called Ether Hour, which is mostly our interview show. Sometimes it's just me and Dimitri talking about history or a more sort of a less timely topic, like a less like time sensitive weekly analysis topic. We've had Father Peter Heers on, we've had Nick Griffin on, former member of European Parliament for the BNP. We've had all sorts of big guests on. Jay Dyer, obviously. We'd love to have you on as well in the future,
I'm gonna
Danny.
come on.
Hopefully,
Just tell me
yeah,
when. Just tell
yeah.
me
So
when.
if people go to that link that Danny showed earlier, worldwarnow.co. You can be prompted to subscribe for free, and there's free previews of all the premium shows. We'll give you 20 minutes for free, but to listen to the full 2 hours, obviously you got to get behind the paywall.
It's great stuff. I've been. I'm gonna put the link back up here for your show so they can go to. It's great stuff. I've been listening to. I've been binging
Thank
your
you.
material, and I'm not even like a geopolitics guy. I mean, I'm like a dead languages making
Mm.
documentaries about niche historical topics. Like, ooh, by the way, I just finished the 4-part series on the Nestorians. Not gonna lie, I'm not gonna lie, it's very good. It's very good. I, you know, oh,
Well, and we do a bit of that ourselves. If you want to move us to Russia, again, your show, I'm not trying to rush you on, but one of our big things we've talked about on the show is the ritual regicide of the Romanov royal martyrs and a lot of this more niche Russian imperial history about the transition of Romanity from the Byzantine Empire to the Russian Empire. And when I went to Crimea in Russia, I saw the site of Saint Vladimir's baptism into Orthodoxy, and they've built this massive Byzantine revival style cathedral there to commemorate.
oh
And it's
wow.
this massive museum and complex. If no one's looked it up, New Chersones. It's frankly one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in the entire world. And it's basically just a massive Orthodox monastery, cathedral, theme park, historical center, archaeological dig. It's amazing. It's one of the craziest things. And so many of these prophecies now, I think, even are relevant to that, and the understanding that Russia did become the third Rome, and what occurred in 1918 when the Romanovs were martyred by the proto-Zionist Bolsheviks. That triggered the past 100 years has been basically a chaotic, non-Christian Talmudic century, because the Kathekon, the restrainer of the Antichrist, which was the Christian emperors all the way from Constantine to Tsar Nicholas II, they were sort of fully dethroned in that regard. And so I think a lot of what's happening now, and the reason things are getting so crazy, is because we just had 100 years, the 20th century, of unmoored anarchy, basically, when it comes to the lack of kingship on the earth.
Well, people forget that for all the faults of monarchy, at the end of the day, right now we effectively live in a. I mean, whatever you can say about monarchy, I mean, we effectively have the situation where we're not voting our way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're stuck. So, okay, on top of it, it's like St. John of Kronstadt says, heaven is a monarchy, hell is a democracy. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying I'm someone who's, I mean, if we're going to have a democracy, it has to be very, very, very limited, really like a small percentage of highly intelligent males doing the voting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's it. I mean, it's not like, oh, yeah, all guys are going to vote. No, very few men, very few. You have to have ways of limiting them out. You have to be property owners. You have people who actually vest in society, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. I think the situation will crash and burn, and we're going to end up with a monarchy. Really quickly, there's two numbers I want to point out to you guys: 44% and 94%. Okay, 44% is a number of you who are watching who are not subscribers. Okay, 44% of you watching are not subscribers, which means that you can't get updates for new content coming out. We do a stream every Saturday morning, 9 a.m., or almost every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Okay. Second number is 94%. 94% of you are not signed up for notifications. I couldn't believe that. I was stunned. 94% of you are not getting a notification when I put out a new video. So you need to ring that bell. The sooner you ring that bell, you start to get notifications about everything going on this channel. This is really important for you guys, okay? Now, if you don't want to know about content coming out, that's fine. But I was at St. Andrews in Riverside, California, Father Josiah Trenham's parish last Sunday. Beautiful parish. Music was fantastic. And a couple, actually about 4 or 5 guys, about 5 guys came up to me. They recognized me from the internet. And they go, "Oh my gosh, you're here. I can't believe it." And I'm like, "I'm here too. I can't believe it. I thought I was going to be in San Diego right now, but I'm in Riverside. This is great." And I mentioned a show I had done yesterday with Ben Luigi. And the guy goes, "Oh, you did? You did a live stream?" And I go, "Well, yeah." And she like signed up for notification. Well, he didn't know. So if you want to catch these shows without any ads, you got to watch them live. The only way to do that is ring the bell for notifications. By the way, two of the guys who came up to me, uh, they were big fans of yours, Conrad. They were super
Amazing.
stoked. They were almost as stoked as I was to know you were coming on this Saturday. I'm
Well,
very
that's amazing.
excited, and we're gonna do something you and I where I go on your show and ramble on for a while. Okay, I want to know. I want to get to the Russia stuff in a bit, but my area of interest is primarily the Middle East. So, of course, I'm more interested in what's going on in the Middle East. I've lived in Turkey, Syria, Palestine/Israel. I've lived in Sultan of Oman. I've been to Lebanon. I've been to Jordan. I'm an Arabic speaker. At one point, I spoke Turkish decently. Now, no longer. Çok biraz Türkçe biliyorum. You're very little, but I mean, where do you see this situation going with the Iran-Israel war? Is it just going to smolder on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I mean, with Iran itself, it's a bit more of an open-ended question because at a certain level, Iran has won the initial stages of this war. I think that's I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost indisputable. We killed some of their leadership, but they've maintained succession. Their economy has not collapsed. If anything, at this point, the domestic pressure in Iran is from the people that want the government to blow up Israel, as opposed to doing these negotiations with America.
It
Like
it's the
the
cutting
grand
off the heads of the Hydra.
yeah, the grandson of Ruhollah Khomeini is on TV, like state broadcasters just being allowed to completely disparage the negotiating team, the president, all the saying, anybody that negotiates with America is a traitor. I mean, this is the stuff you're hearing from like the actual people of Iran. And so the idea that there's going to be some kind of negotiated settlement, I think is just nonsensical. And again, there are parties within Iran that would be down to perpetuate that sort of endless cycle. But the current supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the IRGC leadership that have assumed the roles of their predecessors who were killed in the first stages of the war, these are not people that are really interested in talking to the United
They're
States. These are
much more
people.
radical than the previous people.
Yeah, and do you blame them at a certain like they
No.
like yeah, like who's right? Like at this point, which strategy was better? Decades of talking and then getting struck, or fighting back, and now you're like controlling the Strait of Hormuz for the first time. Like the lesson you've learned is that you have the capability to stand up for yourself, and it's working. So the military option for the Iranians has been working, and I think they are going to continue to do this back and forth with the US and Israel until America is going to finally either have to decide to completely cut bait and leave Israel alone, which I'm very skeptical. I don't think that's literally even a possibility based on the
No.
Israeli capture of our country. But more than likely, Trump's going to try some operation. He was just talking about taking Karg Island again. If people don't realize, we've moved more, even though we stopped the blockade. We've been pulling out half of our Strato tankers away from Israel, B-52s. We're like, oh, so peace is happening. The war is dying down. No, that's a deception. We've moved more amphibious landing Marines and amphibious ships themselves into the area, into CENTCOM from the Pacific. So right now, we're more prepared to take one of these islands than we ever were, even before the Memorandum of Understanding or any of these peace negotiations, ceasefire stuff was being discussed. So whether Trump sends people in to try to retrieve this nuclear material, whether we try to do, I mean, the original plan was to have the Kurds go in from Iraqi Kurdistan and establish, a more Kurdish enclave, which with operations against the regime in Tehran can be operated. But Erdogan, if people don't know, in January during the big protests that everybody thought that was when we would strike Iran, when the big protests in the streets and the Iranians cracked down and arrested all those people. People thought that was when the Kurds were and everyone was going to make their move. And apparently the Kurds did make their move. Erdogan phoned up the Iranians, shared intelligence with them about what the Kurds were doing. The IRGC then quickly and immediately repelled the Kurds. And almost every day since the ceasefire, Iran has struck Iraqi Kurdistan. Obviously, there are U.S. bases there in Erbil, but the Kurds are the kind of number one, fifth column, the block that the U.S. hopes to use and Israel hopes to use against Iran there, and it seems to be continually failing. I mean, Trump was excoriating. He's like, the Kurds, they took the weapons that we gave them and didn't use them to overthrow Iran. And it's like, well, that's quite the admission there.
One of the biggest promoters of Kurdish nationalism is Israel. And the reason is they have to promote nationalism everywhere they go, because the moment there's nationalism, Jews realize what a small group they are. This is a reason why people forget. There's a reason why huge Jewish populations ended up in Eastern Europe exactly where they did. Have you heard about this theory, about the flatland theory? Have you heard this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so you've been to Ukraine, Russia. It's very flat, correct? Okay. Yep. Militaries can move very quickly through flat areas, and it's a very flat area on the way to, say, Germany, which historically has been very wealthy. So you have a flat area where militaries can move easily on the way to a wealthy area, which means you're going to constantly have invasions. You're going to constantly have wars, which means political instability, which means a late sort of forming of nation states in that area because it's political chaos. It's just going to be little fiefdoms. If you have nation states forming later, you have a national consciousness forming much later. So Jews end up in Eastern Europe simply because it's politically chaotic. They can fit in as just one more group in this patchwork quilt of ethnicities and nationalities. And that's really what those frontier lands were. There's a reason why, I'm sorry, what was his name? The Metropolitan of the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. What was his name?
Metropolitan Onufry?
Yeah, Onufry. The guy speaks 9 languages. Okay. What are they? Most of them are local languages. This is one of the reasons he was made the Metropolitan, because the flock he oversees is so multi-ethnic and they're local ethnicities, because they need someone who can speak Hungarian, Romanian, Ukrainian, Russian. So, I mean, all these local languages for this patchwork quilt of people in that area. So this is why you see Jews end up in Eastern Europe. It's also that, despite the fact that we're constantly accused of like pogroming these people, it's like we tend to be like pretty tolerant people in terms of like we'd rather convert people than kill them. So I mean, the reason they grew up, such huge Jewish populations who grew up in these areas is precisely because we weren't killing them.
Well, and people need to, we have an episode of our show, if you get behind the paywall at Ether Hour, called The Truth About the Pogroms. And we go into a lot of history about that. And many of them were effectively more like pitched battles between Jewish militias and local Christians. Often it was icon processions that were attacked by, Jews with iconoclastic tendencies and these sorts of things. And you talk about the flat area of Eastern Europe, which of course before, the 19th and 20th centuries was the Pale of Settlement, which was where, the Jews had their rights, which was where they were living outside. When they entered the Russian Empire outside of the Pale of Settlement, they were not citizens. They weren't considered like that. And so you had this shtetl culture develop. Obviously, this is basically where Netanyahu, all of these people that went and changed their name. I mean, his real name's Milikowski, right? Like these are where, all these people.
Hey.
Yeah. And conspiracy, shocker, Israel controlled by Jews. But the
Yeah.
but the,
Well, and
uh,
something to be pointed out is that the DNA, you heard about the theory about like the Khazars, that they were the real
mhm,
Jews. Okay, well, DNA evidence has revealed something, and that is Ashkenazi Jews are not actually real Jews, and the reason is
mm,
they have no female line of descent. Ashkenazi Jews, their line of descent is purely male, like the
mm,
Karaites. Well, the Karaites were ruled to be not real Jews, and people argue about this. They go, "Well, that was only because they wanted to try and save the Jews wanted to try and save the Karaites from Hitler by claiming they weren't real Jews. Hitler said he would defer. Okay, but the Jews traditionally, even before that, didn't consider the Karaites real Jews because they
mm.
were patrilineal, not matrilineal. So Ashkenazi Jews, it appears that their line started with, I want to say, four brothers who married local women. And so Ashkenazis are horrifyingly inbred. They have a 40% higher rate of mental illness than the general population because they're so inbred.
Yeah, and
Which
the,
which
and
which I can only imagine what it is for, like, Somalis.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, those
Oh,
people
man.
are real are like I mean, there was something from the, National Health Institute, the N and no, National Health Services, NHS, about Pakistanis in England, and it was just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
good lord, the level of inbreeding,
Oh, yeah, and
it's
that's the thing.
just
People have to realize,
surreal.
like, that's, like, hundreds of years because the percentage of birth defects from, consanguinity and these sorts of things are actually very low on, like, the first encounter. Like, if you're marrying, like, your first cousin, it's almost, like, negligible, but when it starts to compound and it's just these local, areas, next thing you know, it becomes this whole big problem. And when you look at, again, the Pale of Settlement in Ukraine, and you're talking about all this stuff and the pogroms, these same the same members of the Pale of Settlement, these same Ashkenazi Jews that were, uh, that were supposedly getting pogromed, they were participating in all of these actions, were the earliest anti-monarchist revolutionaries in Russia. These were the
Correct.
Decembrists. These were, again, not necessarily all Bolsheviks, but these were proto-communists, liberals, Masons, people that were perpetuating this stuff, almost largely entirely Jewish. And if you read about the Odessa pogroms and these pogroms in the late 19th century, a lot of these people fled, and where did they flee to? They fled to Palestine. These were some of the first settlers that fled before the Nakba, before 1948 and the Balfour
Right.
Declaration. These Pale of Settlement Russian, Ukrainian Jews that were, again, basically always in a state of low grade civil war against the power structure of the Tsar. Finally, between like that, the last six czars, there's a reason why before Hitler, the Tsar was sort of the paragon of disdain for world Jewry, was because, again, from Paul the First to Nicholas the Second, not a single one of those monarchs could be considered philo-Semitic, could be
Yep.
considered in any way. I mean, they fought against Napoleon is the liberator of the Jews on the continent, and people wonder, like, oh, Napoleon, why is he considered a type of Antichrist by the Russian Orthodox Church? He liberated the Jews. He invaded all of Europe to try to create a one government system, and the Russian Empire, the Orthodox Empire, is what pushed him back. I mean, so again, people
Well, and he
200
tried
years
to
ago.
he wanted to reestablish the Sanhedrin.
Mhm.
I think he actually did reestablish the
He did,
Sanhedrin.
yeah. He established the Sanhedrin, and the Grand Orient Lodge was the main headquarters of,
Correct.
Bonapartist,
There you go.
operations,
Yeah, he was
which again,
not a good
Macron still gives state addresses in the Grand Orient Lodge to this day in France.
I wanna know, just as a side note, Bridget Macron, chick or dude?
I mean, I've always thought Michelle for a long time, so I've always been open to the ideas, but you know, maybe we'll have to see the try. I'm excited for the Candace Owens versus the state of France, try, to emerge. We're gonna see how that goes, I guess. But yeah, I mean, she looks like a man, but at the same time, I mean, we got to also recognize, these, even if she's not a man, that we have to tell the sensitive young men in the audience to not fall for the hag maxing. You can't go like, if some
Yeah,
older woman is giving you money and telling you, again, don't be better than that. Have some self-respect.
yeah. Aloha Max, with the
Mm.
Hawaiian shirt, which recently I've given into my, Aloha Maxing tendencies. Never been to Hawaii, but, love the shirts. Um, so really quickly, I mean, the third temple, do you think, I mean, in the prophecies from that you've read, and first off, do you have a book or books that you'd recommend that contain these prophecies? They've been vetted.
Yes, yes, and, obviously, again, a lot of this is I'm good friends with some spiritual children of Elder Ephraim. I'm friends with Father Peter, who's introduced me to a lot of people in Greece, in Russia, so a lot of these things I've sort of tracked down, like, primary sources and these sorts of things, but if you the best book, if you wanna get to cover this kind of stuff, it's The Eschatological Visions of the Blessed, by the Eschaton Vigil. I know the guy that puts it together, Jonathan. I've had him on my show several times. Great, great guy. And if you go to if you go to eschatonvigil.org and go to the shop, you can get the book. This book is also very good. Unfortunately, it is not
How do you spell
currently in
that?
print.
Eschaton
Eschatological,
Vigil.
Eschatological.
Wait, Eschaton Vigil. Let's see.
Yeah.
Eschaton Vigil, brothers. It's later than you think. I'm gonna put. Let's go to. It says the prophecies. I think you said.
Well, go to shop.
Uh,
Shop should be where the book is.
shop. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna put a link for this. We have Elders on the End Times. And we have the eschatological visions of the blessed, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me put a link for that here in the chat if you guys want to check it out.
And then this book is no longer in print. I believe he's working on a better second edition. But this is book Nuclear Armageddon, Orthodox Prophecies for World War III and Beyond by Christos Roumanis. He is a pious Greek man who frequently visits Mount Athos, who knew many of these, who knew St. Paisios and all of these others. And it's a very good reference book. It has some of the best sources on the Marble Emperor. It talks about a Greek general who was friends with a Turkish general who was a crypto-Christian that took him to see the body of the Marble Emperor in its secret location. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in that book, which I've talked about on the show extensively. And yeah, this book, there's also a book on the website called Russia Before the Second Coming. A lot of those prophecies are incorporated in this book, but that one focuses more on the Russian saints, which that's one of the most interesting points of confluence is people are going to say like, oh, you just believe all of the Greek nationalist bluster about retaking Constantinople. They've been saying that since 1453. But the Russian prophecies and saints line up. Like it's this, the Russians who didn't even Russian saints existing hundreds of years apart didn't even know about the Greek saints at the time are saying much of the same stuff. And then you have to wonder if it was all just Greek nationalist bluster, would they have made up a prophecy where they don't liberate the city themselves? Like why would they
Yeah,
like if it
these
was all
people
about
they claim
yeah.
they claim
So if you've
everything
ever
for
met a Greek
themselves.
person and you want to claim these prophecies are made up and by a Greek person, if you've ever met a Greek person, you know that if they were making it up, it would be some glorious Greek retaking of the city. But that's not what the prophecies say. The prophecies say the Russians will take it and they'll basically be forced through political circumstances to give parts of it back to Greece. And
And
that's a lot more.
people think that's obnoxious, like that's not possible. But keep in mind, Constantinople was the capital of the Ottoman Empire for how long? 1453 to what, 1923? And I want to say 1923. And the Allies had forced Turkey into giving up Constantinople
I mean, people
temporarily.
forget about Sykes. People forget about Sykes-Picot. I mean, Russia was actually supposed to have Constantinople if the Brits and everybody else didn't backstab them and go against them.
Absolutely. Real quickly here, we got Tanner G. Thanks for the $2. I keep an icon of St. John the Merciful in my office. Right on, buddy. Love it. All right. And Chetnik became a new YouTube member. He'll have access to the language courses every Friday I'm giving him. He also has access to all the premium content. Thank you so much. Rachel Wilson, excellent. Thank you for the $20. Good morning, gentlemen. So nice to open this app and see both of your shining faces. Rachel, it's so nice to have to open the show and see your shining face, see your presence here. And then for my
Rachel
brother
Wilson,
Patrick,
he's been on the show as well, so she's been on Ether
friend
Hour.
of the show, friend of the
Yeah.
show. And my brother Patrick, in case it's Kistimata Shadow Pet. Thank you, Patrick. You're too kind. You're too kind. Okay, let me go back up to. I want to keep the link on screen for your website here, so that we
Thank you.
can keep you
And for
continually.
anyone that wants to support more in the more super chat form, I go live every Tuesday evening, 7:45 p.m. Central. So on YouTube, on X, on Spotify, on Substack. So people feel free to catch me there as well. I'm always hanging out, chatting it up.
Absolutely. And one day I will be, whenever, just tell me when, I will be your guest, and I will ramble on about dead languages. Um,
We'll do it.
I'll tell you everything you want to know about Syriac. Everything. Um, anyway, so all right. So I mean, do you think that they're going to actually build this temple?
You know, I think it's one of those things where it's that question especially sort of depends on it sort of gets us to the real purpose of these prophecies, which is it so that we can impress our friends with knowing the future? Is it so that we can scare everybody with things that are going to happen? No, it's so that we can repent. It's so that we can realize that the saints knew what was coming, realize that God is in control and can tell anybody anything about what happens in the future. And for that we should focus on what we can control, which is our repentance and our spiritual life. And one of the whole points of all these prophecies, even just about World War III, let alone the rebuilding of the third temple, is that God can push these things back if
Yes.
he deems it correct to do so, and if he deems the people of having repented, or if he just deems that it is in his will. And people say like, oh, well, what are you going to say if these prophecies don't happen? Are you going to admit you were wrong? And well, frankly, I hope a lot of these prophecies don't happen. You know what I mean? Like, I hope
Correct.
that these people don't die. I hope all these horrible, I mean, the prophecies for America are terrible. Apparently millions of people are going to die. The West Coast is going to sink into the ocean. Volcanoes are going to erupt. I mean, this is what Elder Ephraim and Eldris Galactia talked about. So again, I hope a lot of this stuff doesn't happen, but we need to recognize the same thing with the building of the third temple. Could the third temple have been built hundreds of years ago? It very well might have. You know, maybe Julian the Apostate could have succeeded, but God stopped that from happening by literally bringing up tongues of fire from the earth to blow it up. So do I believe that it could happen in 2026? Absolutely, I believe that it could happen. And I think, frankly, the only reason that it won't happen will be because of the grace of God. I think if it doesn't happen, because I mean, like you said, you've been there. I've seen these people. They brought the red heifers. They had like 10 of them in a secret location. I mean, this is not a joke. This is not some prank or something like that. This is millions of people. I mean, tens of thousands of people who all have probably billions and trillions of dollars between themselves are in favor of this. So do I think that it
Well,
can happen? Yes. Do I think that it will happen? Personally, I think that we're going to have to see a lot more stuff with World War III and the spreading of the gospel before the temple is really built, because again, we know that the true gospel has to be preached to all four corners of the world before the coming of the Antichrist. And frankly, I think that's another good evidence of orthodoxy, is if that was true, if the gospel being preached to all of the world was what needed to happen, to then things would start to happen. Well, frankly, Protestantism and Catholicism have pretty much already done that. It's kind of been that way
yeah.
for the past 60, 70 years now, as far as them reaching places. So when you realize, oh, it's the Orthodox gospel that has to actually be preached sufficiently around the world, you start to maybe realize why some of these things haven't quite come about yet.
Now, about the 10 red heifers, wasn't it that they weren't like red enough was the
Yeah,
problem?
they like they found one of them was like, we think it's perfect, and then they found one like blonde hair on it or whatever, and that was it. And you realize like Jesus came to save these people from this absolute nonsense, and they just didn't listen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's weird. I mean, the other thing I've heard is that someone I know went to Mount Athos, and they, oh, no, no, it was someone I know, one of their friends went and they asked a guy about the end times, one of the elders, and he goes, the time is like an accordion. And when we repent, God gives us more time. And when we don't repent, the time grows closer. So the things are prophesied, it's, you don't know if they're going to happen or not. And people might say, well, that's a cop out. It's like a no true Scotsman at that point. But God is loving and he is kind. And he does give us time to repent. And, that's like it's like you said, you have to focus on your own repentance.
Yeah, and I
That's your
think
thing. Are
again,
you praying in the morning and evening? Are you following the fast? Are you doing spiritual readings? Are you, avoiding social media whenever you can?
and that's part of why I know a lot of these prophecies are true and whatnot, and I'm very energized, I guess, by them and interested, because a lot of these people are I mean, very recently, I mean, I'm friends with the Christopher from the Holy Wisdom YouTube channel. If anyone's interested in this, I highly recommend checking that channel out.
Mhm.
But he lives in Greece, and his family have elders and eldresses that they know that are very pious people, and he's like, yeah, this woman who old eldress, she hasn't ever spoken to me about anything political ever, and she told our family that the events that are coming with the Turks are very much at hand. I mean, apparently, just in the past few days, I was told by a spiritual son of Elder Ephraim from some people at Philotheo on Mount Athos that Yoronda Ephraim appeared to someone and said that the Turks are coming, Panagia Theotokos appeared to people on Cyprus, apparently saying that repent, the events that are coming are effectively at hand here. And people need to recognize that this is all very scriptural. I mean, what happened to the Ninevites? God prophesied their destruction to Jonah. And what did Jonah not want to do? He didn't want to preach repentance to them so they would be destroyed. Like, he wanted that to happen. So people are like, why are you talking about all of this? It's like, well, because I don't necessarily want these things to happen. And look, people say like, well, this scares people. This doesn't get people. Like, well, Metropolitan Neophytos says this. We've had this very long period of peace in the world after World War II, relatively speaking. And what did we use that peace for? Did we use it for good? Did we use it to shore up treasure in heaven? Did we use it to help the poor? No, we did like the exact opposite of that. We rebuilt
Right.
Sodom and Gomorrah and are
We
rebuilding,
skittled out.
and now we're doing the Tower of Babel all over again with these penis-shaped rockets getting launched into the sky. So the whole
What?
thing is the I'm just talking
Wait,
about
the
it.
shape of these like phallus?
Yeah, I mean, why do you think Saturn V and these NASA rockets? Obviously, it makes sense that they're doing this, but specifically the space. We can get into space at a different time. Jack Parsons and the occult nature of all of that, but just in general, I think everything about our society right now is decadent and trying to overthrow God when it comes to the science stuff, when it comes to all these other things, and I think that again, yes, we can repent, but at this point, when it comes to the Third World War and a lot of these things, I think the great slap is coming at this point. It's almost too late.
Mm. Hmm. Wait, are you saying that there are actual rockets that are phallic shaped?
Yeah.
Like they're purposefully built for that? Like they have like
Well, I mean, if you look at, Jack Parsons, who came up with the chemical recipe for liquid jet fuel, claims that it was revealed to him through aliens on a psychedelic mushroom trip, in which in that mates he was also sleeping with his mom. So these people are all these people are all the whole thing is completely occultic and demonic. I mean, Buzz Aldrin, high level Freemason, with the supposedly everyone says, oh, he confected the Presbyterian Eucharist on the moon. Well, guess what he did? But right before that, he set up a lodge on the moon and established the first Masonic lodge supposedly on the moon. So the
oh wow.
whole world is this again. All the world is sort of a stage, and God is going to. I think this great slap. I mean, what is one of the things that? I mean, again, if people read, I don't have the book. I lent it to my godson. But if people read the spiritual councils of St. Paisios, volume 2, Spiritual Awakening, you can see how he just completely prophesized in the 80s COVID and the vaccines, and how it will be a predecessor to the mark of the beast. And when you look at all of that and realize how, oh man, I lost my train of thought. What else was he? I completely had something else that he was going with there. That's what it is. The Third World War. Why is this part of why this is going to happen? It will be to stop the new world order from basically establishing this system. Because I had Maria Z, who's very, very famous podcast host. We had her on my show recently, devout Orthodox Christian, wonderful lady, one of the best experts on quantum dot technology, talking about the new kind of mark of the beast technological system that's being established. And St. Paisios says that a lot of these terrible events that will be very hard to live through will still be a mercy, because they will push back and prevent this kind of totalizing sort of pre or proto antichrist system from establishing itself, which again, COVID could also be considered a mercy in that regard. We sort of got a test run, a sort of a separating of the wheat from the tares. And now, I mean, I don't want to be too controversial here, but I think a lot of people now have an idea of which priests are and aren't going to stand strong in the midst of a future sort of event like this. And now if something like this happens again, and we sort of all have to hunker down with our communities, I think we're going to be more prepared for it.
Do you think okay, so here's one of the things about St. Paisios. I mean, are these prophecies actually like traceable to him, or it's like Sotiri Baklavopoulos says that he heard from, like George Souvlakidis, the elder. I mean, because like
Yeah.
I go to church with Greeks, and like getting a coherent thought out of these people is like, roll the dice.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really. I mean, I mean, we had a lady who's highly educated from our parish come over to our house, and she was like 10 minutes late, which is like fine. I'm late for stuff constantly, but we're like, she hasn't arrived, and we hear this like like wiping sound on the front door. Like, what is that sound? You got to open the door. Before the lady rung the doorbell, she's like wiping dust off of our front door. I'm like this, like I kind of, I'm a little bit skeptical. You know what I mean? Like when I hear like, oh, they said the end is near. I'm just like, yeah, I go to church for those people. Like, um, they're not. I mean, I have a guy who every single time he sees me, he calls me Yerasimos, and reminds me that his godfather's name was Yerasimos. So we're very loving, very kind people. Um, but a little loopy. I mean, do we have actual letters of Saint Paisios that are confirmed to be from him, where he states these things about like the temple being rebuilt in Turkey and
Yeah, so
Russia?
if you read the so first the vaccine stuff at least, you read the spiritual counsels of St. Paisios, those are published by Soroti Monastery. It's literally just dictations of them just him laying in bed and they were just writing down what he said.
Okay.
And he explicitly blessed these books to be published. There's like 7 volumes of them now. But this book, there's been multiple other books that were blessed even during the lifetime of St. Paisios. In this book, for example, it has full citations, full footnote citations at the bottom of every page explaining. Let me try to find, I mean, just some of the book. I mean, there's entire sections with each in the St. Paisios section, all about the different books from which this is a part of. But beyond even that, most of the prophecies that I recount and tell were basically told directly to me by Metropolitan Neophytos of Morphu, who was a spiritual son of St. Paisios, St. Porphyrios, St. Iakovos, and he received and St. Evmenios, and he has been, I mean,
Wait,
show
all
me
four of them
correctly,
at once?
not all at once, but he was going to St. Porphyrios as a young man. St. Porphyrios told him he needed to go to St. Iakovos to be his spiritual father. St. Iakovos became his spiritual father. And then he would also regularly visit St. Paisios on Mount Athos, because St. Paisios, he was a refugee. I'm sure you're aware, he was a refugee from Asia Minor. Metropolitan Neophytos was a refugee from northern Cyprus. His brother was killed in the Turkish invasion in 1974. And so Metropolitan St. Paisios had an extreme heart for refugees in the Greek diaspora. So he would always talk to the Cypriots and whatnot, and had them in regularly. But yeah, this book, again, very detailed citations. I've had it even looked over by monastics and spiritual children of the people that are involved and whatnot. And of course, there are certain made up prophecies that people have attempted to proliferate, but
What
some
would
of a
be
lot of
some of
those have been,
those?
I believe some people, well, actually, here's a different example. There was a letter that it's in the same vein. There was a letter that used to go around all the time, supposedly from St. Porphyrios, that St. Porphyrios had reportedly sent to St. Paisios in the 80s and 90s, telling him, you need to stop talking about all of these prophecies. Like, this is driving people crazy. You're scaring people. And the Metropolitan Neophytos did research into it, and he found out this letter never existed. This was not something that, this was something that a person who thought they had heard something about this from, this was sort of the second kind of thing. And then it became this big lore. Every time you would talk about the prophecy, someone would post this, until finally
Oh, I
I had to start
see.
responding with Metropolitan Neophytos. And Metropolitan Neophytos, who's the one who initially said that this letter, he said, someone told me about this letter, and they looked into it. He's like, no, this actually is not true. And so people for a long time thought that, oh, people were using St. Paisios as this crazy kind of thing, and St. Porphyrios calmed them down. St. Porphyrios has some prophecies that are pretty much just as crazy as St. Paisios. I mean, what did one of the reasons I listened to Metropolitan Neophytos so heavily, one was because during COVID, right at the beginning, I had maybe received communion as an Orthodox Christian 4 or 5 times. Everything shuts down. Metropolitan Neophytos is in Cyprus getting arrested by the Cypriot authorities for blessing the waters of theophany and not restricting his services. They're making him sit outside the courtroom of his own trial because he refuses to wear a mask. This is a heroic person. And he said, when he was a young man, St. Porphyrios said, Omeros, well, his name was Homer in the world, but you will, once you pass your 50th year, you will begin to speak and people around the world will hear you. And he's like, what does that even mean? This is in the 80s. And he's like, the technology of the time will facilitate people hearing your voice everywhere. And Metropolitan Neophytos through YouTube it's everywhere. I mean, that's how I found out about it. So the Metropolitan Neophytos regularly talks about how St. Porphyrios is like the patron saint of kind of technology and sort of the future here. And he talks about how even though it'll be used for much evil, God will still use it for much good, for the spread of orthodoxy, which, I mean, you know more about that than me, is spreading orthodoxy on the internet. And I think that, I mean, we're literally watching St. Porphyrios' prophecy be fulfilled.
I don't think people like. How old are you?
I just turned 28.
Congratulations. Okay, so
Thank
you kind of. I'm 42. I remember getting my first email address when I was, like, 16 and
Mhm,
thinking, "Huh, this'll be interesting." And I remember the internet when it was in its infancy. For people below 25, I mean, even, like, under 30, you've grown up with it. And I don't think you guys realize how revolutionary this is. I mean, it used to be you wanna learn something, you had to, like, go to the library, you had to look through a card catalog. I actually learned how to use a card catalog in school. Like, we're watching something that the only thing I can think of in terms of, like, communication level of communication being, like, this open and this, like, revolutionary was the troops of Alexander spreading Greek language.
mhm. Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
maybe the
that
printing press.
oh, either the print well, I mean, the printing press was like people could still write and, I mean, they could read
Yeah,
things
yeah.
publicly. Okay, it was huge, but, like, all of a sudden you have Greek all the way from India up into yeah, across, like, effectively to Spain in some cases. There's massive amount of communication available, right? And it was at those troops of Alexander who was spreading their dialects of Greek that we now know as Koine, that really allowed the Christianity to spread rapidly, as well as using Aramaic, which was very popular as well, sort of a substrata Greek in the cities, Aramaic in the countryside. And it's a similar thing now with the internet in terms of just the explosion of I mean, I don't wanna disregard the printing press because it was massively important, okay, but it was like people the thing about people being able to communicate with one another in a single language, I mean, you can print something off, people don't speak the language, like, "What's this for?" Like, it's a pretty picture.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden with the internet, we can do things like we can auto dub languages.
I
This
mean,
is incredible.
I pay $35 a year for Telegram Premium, and I can subscribe to a channel in any language and just select auto translate, and it's like it's all in English. Like,
There you go.
I don't even know what the original language was. It's, like, frankly, very Babelian.
Wow. 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 Real quickly here, I wanna hear about Russia, but we're gonna take a quick break here. I gotta refill my water here, and I'm gonna make some coffee. Let's say we take a 2.5 minute break here. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Alright, guys, we'll be back in about 2.5 minutes here. Okay, and Okay, can you guys hear me?
I can.
Excellent. Well, if you can, that's what matters most. Okay, let's talk about Russia. Russia, the prophecies, what's going on in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war. You take it where you want to go.
Yeah, so, the Russia-Ukraine stuff, that is where we got started on the show. I even remember in high school, because obviously for people who don't know, my parents, I was born in the DC area. My parents met at the Heritage Foundation. So I was raised in a very conservative household. So I was always interested in domestic politics and everything. But what really got me interested in foreign policy in a lot of ways was the invasion of Crimea in 2014 by Russia. And I didn't really have an opinion. I didn't really know what to think. I was 16 years old in high school. Again, caring more about kind of like, Ted Cruz, what do we think about this guy? That kind of stuff. But I realized it was interesting, and it's sort of I couldn't have expressed this at the time, but I realized as a young man the sort of return to history was very interesting to me. The end of the Pax Americana, the Pax Judaica, whatever it is you call it, and sort of the reemergence of clash of civilizations, states versus states, realpolitik, all this kind of stuff. And so it really fascinated me. And for that reason alone, even though as in 2014 everyone's like Russia's the bad guy, all this kind of stuff, I was sort of like, I don't know, but like what if there's something to this, I guess. And then I
Yeah.
become Orthodox, you look into this, you start to understand the schism in Ukraine, you start to understand the history of Crimea and Novorossiya and all of these places. And bringing this back to the prophecies, this is in this book, this is in several other books, and we talked about this on the show well before this was ever written. My co-host Dimitri, he's Russian, he had to translate the original source, but Elder Zosima of Donbass reposed in 2002. I actually was able to venerate his grave on the front lines, very close to the front lines in Ukraine at the monastery that's almost completely destroyed that he helped build. He
Mm.
actually told his spiritual children, the monks there, you need to bury me really, really deep under the ground so that when the Banderites come, they don't dig me up and desecrate my grave. And he said this in the 2000s, and all those people were like, "What are you talking about? Like, who's going to come and desecrate your grave? Like Banderites? This isn't World War." Because talking about Stepan Bandera, the Ukrainians that sided with Hitler in the Third World War, in the Second World War against the Soviet Union. And so they're saying all this stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then before he died, he was giving them all these prophecies. He said, disaster will come out of Kiev. The Kiev Pechersk Lavra will lose all of its grace. It will go to the Optina monastery. And he says that you have to cleave to the Moscow Patriarchate. Anybody that, basically warning there will be a schism and there will be a new church that emerges, and those that, cleave away from the canonical Russian church, it will be a disaster. And again, I went to this monastery. You can see almost all of the crosses on the chest. It's a very big monastery complex. They have a big church that was, I believe, a 1/7 exact replica of the Dormition Cathedral in Moscow, where the czars
Mm.
were inducted and consecrated. The this church, the domes had been struck with the crosses, the chapels, just the crosses had been struck because apparently Ukrainian mortar fire had targeted each cross in these churches, in these chapels. It shows you this really is a truly religious conflict. And when you realize that the persecutions went back well before 2014, the persecutions against the Russian language, the Ukrainianization of this place was what was really going on. And this was prophesied. Saint Lawrence of Chernigov also prophesied the schism in the church in the mid 20th century, in the aftermath of the Second World War. So much of this was foreseen by the saints, and the persecution of the church in Ukraine is very palpable. I interviewed some refugees from Chasov Yar. I was in Gorlovka, which is one of the longer suffering cities that has almost always been behind the front lines away from the Ukrainians, but it's been close enough for so long that they regularly get hit with drones. When I was there, it was very safe. Supposedly, the front line was far, far away. The week after, Ukraine killed like 11 people in a bus on like the same block that I was standing on when I was
Oh,
there. It was a very surreal experience to see something like that happen. But the prophesied nature of all of this, it shows you that this level of persecution is that we saw again. It's the closest thing we've gotten to seeing what the Bolsheviks were doing in the early days. I'm sure people have seen the videos of the church seizures and Metropolitan Theodosius of Cherkasy getting smacked over the head with that stick, and Metropolitan Longin, people just knock on his door and just start beating him in the face, almost killing him. This is something that just happens to bishops there. And I was in Donetsk for this very powerful event that occurred, the Ivron Icon of Donbass. So you know about Mount Athos, Danny, the Iveron icon, you know, from the Iveron Monastery. The famous Hawaii immerse streaming icon that all of us know is a copy of the Iveron icon, one of the most famous icons of the Theotokos. Well, Elder Zosima of Donbass, who I just talked about, who's buried really deep under the ground, he had a monk on Mount Athos at St. Panteleimon Monastery, the Russian monastery there. He loved the Iveron Theotokos so much that he had this monk, please paint me a copy of this so I can have it here in the Donbass. And so he called it the Donbass Iveron, the Iveron of the Donbass. Elder Zosima established a monastery for women outside of Donetsk city. They took care of the icon, and it worked miracles. It's very, very large, and it was a miracle working icon. And then it was this very beloved monastery. And then in 2022, it might have even been sooner than that, but sometime between 2014 and 2022, the icon was taken away from the monastery because the monastery has been effectively destroyed. I went to a service there, and the monastery, there's no roof. They had to put a plywood roof inside the monastery because the domes and the towers have collapsed. The entire thing is riddled in bullet holes. If people read a recent article that was published on orthochristian.com yesterday, you can see all the pictures of this that I took while I was there. And so I was there for the Metropolitan of Donetsk was bringing the Iveron icon back. The Ukrainians had been pushed far enough back that now, for the first time in over 11 years, they could get the icon back into this monastery for veneration, for pilgrimage, and whatnot. And so we had this massive service with 3 bishops. Metropolitan Vladimir of Donetsk, who I believe is 6'10", 6'11", extremely tall guy.
Wow.
And so we were there. I've never seen more priests in my life. It was at least 35 priests, all in this tiny little monastery. And when we walk into, I see we have some Protestants in chat, but as we walked into the monastery, a Ukrainian drone flew right overhead. That was crazy. We thought it was going to do something, but the service was massive. They processed the icon around the church. Everything was blessed, and it was brought back in. And after the icon was brought back in and the bishop was serving at the altar, a Ukrainian missile hit like 500 meters away from the church and shook the whole building. And it was I was scared. I was looking around. I never experienced that before, but all these people are from Donbass. They were like unfazed. They were just like, okay. And Metropolitan Vladimir, he's up there, and you know, he's speaking in Slavonic. He's like, "Those money, buddy," and then like the building shakes. He just pauses for a few seconds, like, and then he just goes right back to it, like nothing even happened. We're like, dang.
Kind of
and there
like
was some national guardsmen there that, you know, they walked outside and, you know, got on the radio and made sure everything was okay, but we just went right along with the service, and that was that. And it was, and there was even media there. The media didn't even like cover it. Like, it was like, I asked so many different people there that were with cameras with local Donetsk media. I was like, send me the footage, send me the clip or the building, and they just didn't even know what I was talking about. They're like, why is this news? Like, why would you care about this? And I'm just like, because people in the West would be interested, but in their minds, it's just been happening for so long that they're just like they're just so used to it. And it's just it's a very crazy
like
mindset.
the family with the alcoholic dad who, you know, says something rude at dinner. They just go right through it. They're just like,
I give them more of the
alcoholic
benefit of
dad
the doubt.
started an argument, you know, whatever, just move past it. You know, just ignore it, proceed. What do you think? Because we've talked about COVID, talked about Russia. What do you think about, you know, if I recall correctly, I mean, Russia, they shut down the churches during COVID.
They did in some. I don't think it was quite as extensive as what was going on in America, and there was some resistance. You know, you had a lot of monasteries that, you know, weren't going along with all of that. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, we talk about this on the show a lot. There is still I mean, Putin still has a rabbi. You know, Beryl Lazar, the head of Chabad Lubavitch in Russia, is still very good friends with Putin. And when I go to Russia, I meet a lot of the real patriotic people, and there are still like very right wing monarchist people in Russia that are not, you know, on the good side of the government. You know, they're sort of they're sort of persecuted in some capacity, and that's not to say that there's like you know, that's the same level as it is here with like cancelization and these other sorts of things. But you know, Russia is in a state of war. You know, there's not free speech like the same way they have here right now. Like, you can't go on the internet and talk about how, you know, you hate the Russian war effort and you want Russia to lose. They're probably going to come and have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
But during COVID, the main thing that they didn't have was there was nothing akin to a vaccine mandate. I think only 20 some, maybe 30% of Russia, I think, received the vaccination. So it wasn't a super high number. Maybe a little higher than that, but it wasn't anything close to what we had here. And and in Belarus in particular as well, there was almost nobody got the vaccine. and there was no
Oh wow.
shutdown whatsoever. Like, I mean, people call Lukashenko the last dictator of Europe. Belarus was the only country that did nothing during COVID. So that was the freest place to be, was in Minsk. And a lot of people in Russia went to Belarus, I think, just to have a chiller have a chiller time
Oh no
while
way. Really?
while everything was going. I mean, we all saw the famous Lukashenko interview where he's explaining, like, we do not need vaccination. You just need to eat beets and do all this. And he's like, and not like these Americans. It's just burger, burger, burger for the Americans. It's just
My
just like,
whenever I hear about Lukashenko, I think about him insulting Belarusian language. Like nothing worthwhile can ever be said in Belarusian, and it
well,
sparked a bunch of people got upset and started like studying Belarusian, started like Belarusian language clubs. So language is dying. Language,
it's a fake
Belarusian will.
language to begin with at a certain level.
Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
it's all these things are dialects of like they're just Slavic dialects, right? And then you try and try and centralize them. Okay,
well,
but he
you grab as many Polish loan words as you can from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and try to call it its own language. That's Ukrainian,
uh,
that's Belarusian, that's all of this. Like,
I don't know enough about Slavic languages. In fact, I know almost nothing about them. But I do know some Belarusians, and they've told me that Belarusian will be effectively dead. It'll be replaced by Russian within the next several decades.
I mean, nobody growing up in any of these places really spoke those languages. I mean, Zelensky had to learn Ukrainian when he got elected president of Ukraine. He didn't even know how to speak the language. So,
Oh wow.
like this, like people, the idea that like that's the crazy. Ukraine was, it was like a mass psychosis that occurred for people in Ukraine. Everyone understands Russian. There was nowhere in Ukraine where you were like only speaking Ukrainian, and then suddenly you had militants living in Kharkov, which is a Russian city, demanding that babushkas walking around on the street speak Ukrainian. It was a total complete. I mean, it's sort of the last example of complete attempt at nation building and integration into the West of a, I'm just cleaving a key component of Russia away from it into this capacity. And that's why the special military operation fundamentally happened. I mean, at this point, me and all my patriotic friends in Russia are deeply frustrated with how Russia has effectively refused to truly take the gloves off in Ukraine. And there's an upside to that, which is that in Gaza, Israel exceeded the civilian casualty numbers in Ukraine in the first 4 days. So
Yeah.
if you want to understand how many people Israel kills compared to, people say, how, oh, you're against Israel's war in Palestine, but you support Russia. It's like, well, yeah, because they're waging two fundamentally different types of war. One is waging a genocide. The other is waging a war that, as far as I can tell, they don't even really want to be fighting, based on how they do it. I mean, they've established a slow attritional warfare capability, which it does succeed in the fundamental goal of the special military operation, which is the demilitarization of Ukraine. They like the idea of baiting more of the Ukrainian military into the front to destroy the tanks, to destroy this, to destroy all of these sorts of things. But that strategy is proving to be a lot less effective because Ukraine produces 10 to 15,000 new drones a day. So if you're producing
Oh
10,000 to
whoa.
15,000 drones a day, you can send these. I mean, they're sending 1,000 drone swarms into different cities and at different outposts in Russia, Ukraine all the time. And for those who don't understand modern warfare, most of these drones are on fiber optic cables, so you see they're on these tiny little cables. So you drive, I remember seeing this field. This is actually the only place I saw this. I was surprised I didn't see more of it. But I saw this big field with this one section of trees just had all the cables sort of draped over it. I guess, I don't know what, some big section of drones must have fallen down or something, but it was very
Wow.
strange to see. And the drone warfare is getting to the point where we are, between drones and hypersonics, we're finally getting back into that sort of questionable. I mean, that's part of why Iran and Russia are able to stand up against these powerful countries, is because Iran exceeded a certain capacity in its missiles, and that Russia has these hypersonics, which fundamentally every America and every other country knows that there's no air defense system in the world right now that can defend against a hypersonic missile. So do we want to get to war with Russia? No, because they would launch hypersonic missiles at us.
Yeah.
And that's people. And what are the prophecies? And this brings it all back around. What did St. Paisios say about Russia, Turkey? He says, Russia will close the Bosphorus and Turkey will close the Bosphorus and Dardanelles straits to Russia, and the Turks will turn from the Russians' friends to their enemies overnight, like the snap of a finger. And think about it. Turkey's about to give away their two S-400 air defense systems to a Gulf country to get the F-35, to get 5 F-35s from America from Donald Trump. they're already their air defense systems will do nothing against. They probably can't do anything against the most modern non-hypersonic Russian missiles, let alone hypersonics. So the idea that Russia would be able to quickly overwhelm Turkey if it really decided to, especially if they continue to give away their most modern air defenses, yeah, that's not surprising at all. That's
Well,
very
Turkey's
possible.
military is very infantry focused.
It's about
It's
fighting
tanks and
Kurds
infantry.
in eastern Turkey and Iraq, and yeah,
And it's the Israeli military is really about just mowing down civilians. I mean, they're not
mostly just bombing them
they're
from the sky.
yeah, and then, I mean, they're not the I mean, from what I understand, they're not I mean, they're equipped, they're trained and equipped to do what they need to do for Israel. They're not equipped to fight a war, say, against another state, so to say, another military.
Hmm.
It's not efficient to train people to fight against another state when you need them immediately to deal with militias, say. Takes a
Yeah,
lot more
and
training to
Israel
get people ready to fight a state than just militias. And if you need lots of troops, where are you going to focus your energies? It's in training them to do what you need immediately.
and again, like people are just rethinking all of these strategies. I mean, tanks are almost completely useless now against
Yep.
drones. That's why you look at every tank in Russia, Ukraine, they've got these big, they call them cope cages around them because if they get hit by the drone, the cage will take the majority of the blunt and not just completely disable the multi-million-dollar tank. I mean, the same question becomes with jets. Like, I mean, America tried to claim that them and Israel had established air superiority over Iran in the first 4 or 5 days of that war. That was just a lie. They were just operating with long range bombing runs with these jets. Like modern air defenses have rendered, dogfighting and even these basic
Completely.
doctrines of aerial warfare completely useless. I mean, look at aircraft carriers. Imagine if Iran had hypersonics, like if and wanted to hit our aircraft carriers, would we have been able to post the aircraft carrier as close as we were to Iran? I mean,
No.
even then we were worrying about it. So all of
Well,
these strategies have to be
and
rethought.
going back
And yeah, yeah.
sorry, going back to what you said, we had to move the aircraft carriers and ships as far as possible from Iran.
Yeah.
These
I
things
mean,
are liabilities.
I heard a rumor that there was a direct missile or drone strike on, I don't know if it was the Ford or the Lincoln or on one of the aircraft carriers at one point in the war, and the U.S. basically just covered it up. I heard this from a friend of mine who knows a Greek NATO general. So there was a lot of stuff that we didn't really learn about. I think when it comes to, I mean, what happened even back when in the Red Sea with the Houthis back in 2025, there was all in 2024, there was things that we don't know about from there. I mean, look, we lost an F-35 in this war. We've lost several F-15s. Iran is supposed to be this like, second-rate power. I mean, we destroyed their navy in 3 days, but fundamentally, with again between their missile
They're not a
capabilities
naval power.
and mostly in particular their abilities to launch drones and the unmanned nautical vehicles, the small boat navy. Between those two things, I mean, there's no conventional way to really fight against that. And right now, obviously, the Ukrainians are effectively completely out of Patriot air defense missiles because America's had to redirect all of those air defenses to the Middle East because because Iran is draining them dry. And as far as I can tell right now, with the exception of our base in Kurdistan, America, we've been driven out of Iraq entirely by Iran. Iraq is now literally Iran's just an Iranian buffer, effectively. The Bahraini Fifth Fleet center of our Navy in CENTCOM is completely destroyed. And Qatar, while Iran hasn't struck Qatar quite as hard, we don't operate CENTCOM out of Qatar anymore. We operate CENTCOM out of Western Saudi Arabia. So Iran has completely forced a like major American retreat from the Middle East. But you're not hearing this you'd think, right? You'd think the Democrats or like the left or like some people in America would be using this as a big victory against Trump. But if you think that, you don't understand Zionist control of the parties and of media, because a loss for Israel is not a loss for Trump. It's a loss for the money behind both parties.
Correct.
So
There you go.
the
The uniparty.
so so the idea that, like, again, Trump has probably said harsher things about Netanyahu than many presidents would just because of who he is. Now, he, of course, himself, I mean, 2016, bankrolled by Miriam Adelson. 2020, had the election stolen from him. 2024, same people, Miriam Adelson, Mellon, Elliott, Bill Ackman, all these giga-Zionists, many Democrats converged around Trump. And so now here we are. And it's clear that Marco Rubio is being groomed as Trump's successor for 2028 because he's Miriam Adelson's guy. He's the one that Miriam Adelson is going to go with. And Again, the idea that any other president somehow would have really stood up to this, maybe it would have been a bit of a harder sell to get another president to actually go to war. But frankly, I mean, Trump is more willing to criticize Netanyahu publicly than a lot of other presidents, and look what that does. I mean, it just doesn't really matter. Like, you have
Yeah.
it just keeps going. Like, Trump will demand. I mean, look at this thing with the F-35s with Turkey. Trump is using the F-35 chess piece with Turkey to try to get Israel to pull out of Lebanon. He thinks that because Israel refuses to allow Turkey to get the F-35, Trump's like, nope, we're going to give him the F-35 anyway. He thinks he can get Israel to pull out of Lebanon, and then he'll be like, okay, we won't give Turkey the F-35s. But Israel, that's not how Israel plays. Israel will claim to pull out of Lebanon and just not. Like, that's how it's gone the entire time. And the situation in Lebanon obviously is directly tied with the situation in Iran. And for those people that are, many Orthodox Christians, they hate Hezbollah. They say, oh, the only good thing about this war is maybe Hezbollah will be destroyed. It's, well, if Hezbollah gets destroyed, a quarter of your country is getting annexed by Israel. So if that's what you want, then okay, but don't get mad if me or somebody else calls you like basically just a crypto Zionist, because that's effectively what you are.
So going back a little bit earlier to what you said about where the U.S. bases are operating, I remember THAAD sites, THAAD, I believe, or
Yeah, yeah.
THADD, I forget. Uh, they're absolutely crucial in air defense. We had, I want to say, 4 of them in the Gulf. In the first 2-3 days of the war, Iran destroyed all 3 or all 4. I mentioned this to someone I know, and he goes, "Oh no, this is it's nothing." I go, "Do you know what a THAAD site is? Do you actually know what these do?" They're like I mean, they're radar sites that I think they can track out to 800, 900 miles. Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
to
it takes
the
like 30 people to man it or something.
yeah, they are necessary for taking down medium range ballistic missiles, which are what Iran's using against Israel. Okay, uh, Iran took out all of them in the first 3 days of the war? That's pretty major. That's pretty scary. These guys were much more prepared for, and I'm not a fan of the Iranians, the regime. They're bad people. I mean, this is really like you're watching with the Israelis and the Iranians, you're watching 2 end time death cults fight one another. But I mean, the Iranians are far more prepared for this than really anyone in America or Israel thought. I think the Israelis thought that they could just throw American bodies against a situation and then get what they want. They could sort of, repeat Ukraine where they get the Ukrainians to just throw bodies against the Russians and wear down the Russians. Let's not forget the religion that Zelensky is.
Mhm.
But it's the Iranians have proved far more resilient than people had assumed. And there's a huge, and I talked about this with Jay Dyer in the interview I did with him. This is really disastrous because we have a number of countries that are sided with the US because they believe that the US can defend them. Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, the Philippines. Okay. What happens when these countries see that the US cannot defend its own allies in the Gulf? All of a sudden they go, well, if the US can't defend, even Israel, what chance do they have of defending Taiwan or South Korea or
Mhm.
the Philippines against China? And there's such a thing, if someone's a really skilled fighter, there's always someone's better than you at fighting. There's always someone's better than you at what you do. And part of maintaining a reputation is maybe not getting into the fight with the guy you can't beat. And we got into a fight with people who, sure, we can clobber them in terms of bombing them and destroying infrastructure, but their survival is victory. And they've survived. We went into overthrow and it didn't work out. In fact, it's failed spectacularly. They closed the Straits of Hormuz, are in control of the situation effectively. They have the world in a stranglehold. This has been absolutely disastrous in terms of reputation for the US military because we went into something that we were just never going to win to begin with. And, I mean, this is not like cuckoo things. You have really mainstream voices like John Mearsheimer saying the same thing. We never had a chance at winning this one. And
Yeah, I mean,
Mearsheimer is he said, I mean, he's the one that said from the beginning, Ukraine does not have a chance of winning this war against Russia. He said
Mhm.
long before the war with Iran broke out, we're not going to be able to overthrow the Iranians. They're going to rally around the flag. This is going nowhere.
Yeah, and people say like, "Oh, it's gonna be like Venezuela. It's gonna be like these other things you were successful." And no, in many ways, this whole episode is a very good lesson in history that I think is helping kind of shake people awake from the propagandized post-war fugue state that, the kind of world empire has had us in. And that is that, look, say what you will about the Iranians. I'm not a 12 or a Shia. I think their theology is weird. They let you be a woman if you're gay or something, right? It's some very interesting
Yeah,
things
it's
going
all
on there.
sorts of
But
strange stuff.
putting my apologetic hat aside, fundamentally, Iran and their resilience and their ability to confront Israel and their creation of the axis of resistance, it shows you why, at a broad meta level, right wing or religious or authoritarian sort of states that exert themselves in a sort of ideological way, you have to wonder, why is that? Why do we have all this media against it? And it's not necessarily because that's the most evil form of government or because that's evil. It's because that type of society, a society united with a strong racial ethnic core that's a supermajority that abides by the same religion and has fought in a revolution and has emerged as a sort of autarkic entity that really is sovereign, both in its banking, in its world, in its religion, in its media, these sorts of things. That is a society that is fundamentally immune to Jewish infiltration, for lack of a better word. And again, when you look at why society and the world wars went against the Germans in World War II, again, there's a lot of political realities to it, but fundamentally, that society had immunized itself against a form of worldwide control, and it had to be destroyed. And the same thing is happening with Iran. And if Russia keeps moving a certain way, Russia will face that same fate as well. And I think what we see, Trump is like, all right, we'll just make a deal. But the Israelis don't want a deal. It was never about
Yeah, they don't.
nuclear. It was
Yeah.
never about this. It was about, we need to destroy this civilization and put in a leader who will fundamentally neutralize the threat that Iran poses to Israel. And Iran, again, it's not just Iran. They operate the axis of resistance, which is Hezbollah, the Iraqi militias, the Shia militias there, which are extremely effective. Ansar Allah, the Houthis, who are potentially the most effective sub-state actor group in the history of modern society. They've
Yeah, we
existed
couldn't
against,
bomb them out of existence.
we just couldn't do it.
100% superiority over the air, and it's like they're still there.
And they can still close the Bab el Mandeb Straits whenever they want. People forget. You know what we signed? The deal we signed with the Houthis in 2024. You know what we did when they closed the Red Sea? They were hurting us so bad in the Red Sea that we signed a deal with them that said you can bomb Israel and Israeli ships as much as you want. Just let us
Oh,
go
really?
through. Yes, and it
What was
was
this
in
deal
Israel
called?
was so scandalized. It wasn't a public like deal. It was, they just announced it. It was one of these announcements that was, we've just made a deal with the Houthis where they will no longer be striking our ships. And then for the rest of the week, they struck Israel, they struck Israeli ships, and America did nothing because we told them, we don't care what you do. You just have to stop hitting us, because they were so effective. And
Wow.
when you realize that, like, look what happens when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, how damaging to the economy. Imagine the Strait of Hormuz is closed, the Bab el Mandeb Straits are closed, and then thinking about the prophecies, Bosphorus and Dardanelles. That's like 3 of the 5 most critical. What are the 2 other critical waterways? You got Strait of Malacca and Panama Canal. That's it. Those are the
Yeah,
5 big real. Maybe you've got the North Sea up there with Denmark and Russia and Scandinavia,
like
but that's
Gibraltar,
not.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, but again, as far as we've got the Suez Canal out of Gibraltar, so that's Suez. If Red Sea gets closed down, that maybe it becomes more important. But again, we're facing 3 of these ones being closed at once. If you think of Hormuz, Bab el Mandeb, Bosphorus, Dardanelles Straits, everybody's been, we drained our strategic oil reserves, so the gas prices went back down. We've printed a trillion, quadrillion dollars, so everyone thinks the economy is okay. That is going to catch up with us. I know that
Yep.
people have been calling for doom and gloom in the economy for years, and I think the Federal Reserve people are surprised they've been able to kick the can this far down the road, but eventually it's going to catch up with us. And Metropolitan Neophytos talks about this, and St. Paisios talks about this, and St. Cosmas of Aetolia even back in the day talked about this, how you'll need to have donkeys to get around. There'll be such a fuel shortage in some of these places that, again, you won't be able to get around properly. And when you realize that, again, the Strait of Hormuz being closed, it was open for like 4 or 5 days, basically, with things going through. It's closed again this fall. At this point, I don't see how, even if the Strait of Hormuz opened today, in the fall, we're still going to be getting shocks from that. And where the Strait of Hormuz isn't open. So it's this is where, maybe the warning section of the prophecies comes in. It's like, yes, you need to repent and all of these things, and at a certain level, you need to do a little bit of basic emergency preparedness. Like you need to have a way to feed yourself. You need to have a way to filter water and these other sorts of things, and you need to set yourself up in a way where if you can't drive your car super far, you're still maybe able to do these sorts of things and get around, because again, a lot of these economic markers are about to hit, and the supply chain is just not going to be able to sustain itself as over a longer period. If the fuel short, I mean, just the fuel shortages alone will facilitate everything else. That's all that has to happen.
Yes, yes. And it's not like, people go, well, we don't get much of our oil from the Middle East anymore. It's like, that is true. Okay. But let's just pretend the amount of oil we get from the Middle East is, say, 10 or 15%. Okay. If 10 or 15% of the oil that we get is from the Middle East and that's not accessible anymore, it's not like prices go up 10 or 15% only. They go up much more than that, as we've seen. And the other thing about supply chains, we saw this during COVID. People thought you could shut down supply chains and then just reopen and boom, they'd pop back. It's like, no, these are very, very, very delicate systems, extremely delicate systems. If you look at how a tanker travels around the Pacific Rim, how they are able to keep prices relatively low on shipping through grabbing something in one country, taking it to the next, dropping off there, grabbing something there, going to the next, taking it. And they just do the circle around the Pacific Rim. It's all based on being exactly on time, having no backups, the cranes functioning there, personnel showing up on time to work and not calling out sick. It's based on, and those then is based on the factory actually gets things to the port on time, so it can be loaded on time. It's so many different. It's insane the number of variables in all of these things. It's not like there's a dozen variables or 2 dozen. It's thousands of variables that allow a tanker ship. It comes down to a manager in a factory in rural China saying we're going to get things actually done on time so that they can be shipped out to a port so that the ship can pick it up and take it from, Guangzhou to Shanghai. Not even
And
that
again,
far.
and you said 10-15%. Okay, maybe only 10-15% of our oil is from the Middle East. That's not true for China. That's not true for Japan. That's not true for Vietnam, where we get all of our stuff. So, when their prices quintuple and then we're already, selling it on a markup, I mean, that's going to be over for the consumer here. And again, we have to think about the other contingencies here. We had Nick Griffin, former member of the European Parliament, on for the British National Party, great patriot. He discussed how in many ways the US isn't just trying to destroy Iran on behalf of Israel. In many ways, there are people within the US power bloc and the deep state, as it were, that are potentially interested in actually seeing the destruction of Gulf energy, of Qatari LNG, of Saudi Aramco. And of course, Qatari LNG is what? It's like 30% of the world's liquid natural gas or something comes out of Qatar.
It's something
Iran's
extreme like that. Yeah.
And so if Iran destroyed Qatari liquid natural gas, America quickly becomes the provider of like 80% of the world's liquid natural gas. Right now, we're building a massive LNG production and dispersal facility in Alaska to facilitate to East Asia. So in many ways, this war, even as we are losing, in many ways, some people say America was trying to bait Iran into destroying Saudi Aramco, destroying UAE oil facilities, destroying Qatari LNG. And that will then facilitate America as basically, now look, we already captured Venezuela. We're in control of the Venezuelan oil, which is the most oil and largest, richest oil reserves in the world, which used to almost entirely go to China. We're choking Iran out by, again, a lot of this is also about an energy blockade.
But Venezuela's oil is not very high quality. Not all oil is the same quality everywhere.
Yeah,
It
it's
takes
not as
more
high quality.
refining.
We prefer the heavier Saudi fuel that's less deep in the ground in these other places. But Venezuela provided, I believe, 10 to 15% of China's oil at one point. So we basically just stole that from them and we're able to use it for ourselves. And again, what also occurred, and we've had George McMillan, who's a scholar and a military analyst. His level of expertise is almost unparalleled. He came on our show in June 2025 in the midst of the prophesied strikes on the nuclear capabilities in the Israeli 12-day war. And what did he say? He said, I can't remember if he might have even accurately predicted the strikes on the show that time as well, because he said, late June, what gets completed? The final connection to the Iranian rail line that connects through Turkmenistan and through Afghanistan all the way to China, all the way over, again, deep into China through an overland route. So again, America was blockading Iranian ships in the Strait, but Iran was just cranking rail line oil facilities over through to China. What got bombed in the 12-day war as well by Israel? That line connection. Right when it was completed, they made sure to go in and bomb it. And guess what just got bombed yesterday? In the midst of this renewal of conflict, we blew it up again, the Turkmenistan, Iran, China rail line. I thought this was about bringing them to the nuclear negotiating table. No, it's actually about completely isolating them and making sure they can't export their energy to China or any of our other geopolitical enemies. Look what happened. They very much realized that Ukraine is not going to win this war. So over the past 6 months, what strategy did the CIA and the Trump administration and the DOJ get Ukraine to pursue in Russia? It's all just about striking Russian oil energy facilities now. That's all that they do. They strike gas stations. They strike energy facilities in Chelyabinsk. They strike. They're launching drones in from the Baltic states up north in St. Petersburg. And now Russia has experienced up to 20% of its oil productions taken out. They're experiencing fuel shortages. Russia just banned diesel exports. One of the largest diesel exporters in the world just banned diesel exports because they have to have it. In Crimea for the past month and a half, there have been massive queues for the fuel lines, and in Donetsk when I was there, this had actually just begun. This strategy was more in its infancy. It hadn't expanded out across the rest of Russia yet. They are just in Donetsk. They just bomb every gas station, just like the basic 4-pump gas station that you go to. They just bomb them. And I remember every time we get gas, you're sort of always looking around because you don't know if it's going to come and get you. Ironically, in that one of those gas stations, I ran into now a personal friend of mine, but someone I admired much, the 8th great-grandson of Tsar Nicholas I, Gabriel Doroshin, who is fighting in the Donbass. And he's a hardcore Orthodox monarchist who understands the prophecies. I actually interviewed him on my show if people check it out, but that was just a crazy, that was just a bit of a coincidence. But no, the fuel situation is getting out of control when we have Iran. I mean, right now we've got Iran and Russia, in a chokehold as best as the U.S. can manage. Imagine Saudi Aramco, Qatari LNG, UAE production goes down. I mean, at that point, it's like the U.S. is basically the only game in town.
Yeah, and you. I mean, we think we have a polite society until basic infrastructure like that breaks down.
Yeah, you and me were hitting this with the feminism thing a few months ago when that all was blowing up. People just are not prepared for this.
What was it? Remind me again what it was, because
remember when the whole article blew up? Remember the whole Catherine article with the Ortho Bros all the dating stuff? And I was like, look, people need to realize, like, a lot of this feminism stuff goes out the window when people stop answering the 911 call.
I remember that tweet from you. That was a good one. About, like, it was something like it all goes out the window when 911 won't call, and the soy boy husband who is really nice and polite is not the one that you want when the shit hits the fan. And
even then, like, and women, they push their soy boy husbands till he like snaps, and then they're like, oh no, and it's like, you need him to be able to do that. You need him to be able to lock in, and it's so it's bad.
You need a husband who's scary sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, you want someone like that. You want someone who other men are afraid of, because that guy will do damage. And we're really. It's like people say, well, the system is still working. Well, yeah, the Soviet Union's banking system made every payment on time until the day it suddenly didn't.
Yeah.
It's these systems don't slowly. I mean, they do slowly wind down, but they keep working on the surface until suddenly it just doesn't. And
if it didn't work on the surface, the people would jump ship, right? Like if it did,
yeah, and it's I see this all the time, like with boomers. They grew up they got this did you ever play baseball?
I mean, I know I've played some t-ball in my day, but I was a lacrosse guy.
Okay. Well, I'm also not gay, so I never played baseball. So we share that in common. Okay. I was like a basketball and running guy. And I also enjoyed football a bit, but not very athletic though. But that being said, in baseball they talk about a sweet spot on the bat.
Yeah.
It's where is it like what is it like what it's like a couple inches on the bat where you want the ball to make contact to get the absolute best hit. Well, the boomers hit that sweet spot timeline. And I know this sounds like it's such a boomer thing to say. It's like, well, this isn't. I don't think so. I'll tell you why. Guys our age, we're never gonna have the retirement the boomers had, and it's not mathematically popular. It's not mathematically possible to have it. It just isn't. And so demanding that you get that, it's kinda like, look, these guys, they hit the sweet spot. It's never gonna occur again. It's at the cost of us, and trying to insist on having that again is just screwing over future generations.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's there's just no I mean, we all know we could all complain about that this isn't necessarily treading any new ground, but, like and I think a lot of Orthodox people and Christians are finally kind of waking up to a lot of this, but the idea that you made your money and so many celebrities do this, it's like, "I made my money and I'm now giving it to charity," or, "I'm not giving my kids anything." It's just like,
yeah,
well,
like
you ruined society for them, so you could maybe throw them a bone, you know? It's
well,
like
and this is what's funny. If you look at Jews always make sure their money goes to their kids.
oh, exa
You
every
look at
time.
these, like, evangelical boomers who idolize Israel and the Jews, and they would never do that for their kids, and you point out to them, "Well, this is what Jews is, their thing, building generational." Well, like, no, they don't they're not interested, and so for
Yeah.
me, I have 2 daughters, and my attitude is, I don't put money into retirement, I just pay off my principal on my mortgage, and when that's done, I'm gonna buy another house, and then my kids will have these houses when I die. It's everything I do, I save it up to then set them up for success in life. I mean, I'll probably kick off in my late 60s anyway. I mean, my old man died at 62. Like, I'm probably 2/3 of the way done with my life, like
Well, hey, the
so
the Ubi Petrus YouTube channel, it may have bought you another 10, 15 years, I
oh,
think,
I hope, I hope. I mean, one of the things is, like, I'll never retire, just not only monetarily, but also, like, one of the worst things you can ever do, and I talked about this Ben Luigi, one of the worst things you can ever do as a man is retire for your health. It's horrible for your health. I've heard estimates it's akin to taking up smoking a pack or more of cigarettes
mm.
per day. And, as long as you have something going, because men, we tie ourselves to our purpose is work. And as long as you feel like you have a purpose, you're usually going strong. You can weather the storms. You can sort of, skip over those down points in life and it keeps you going. The moment you don't have a purpose, where you're not like, okay, I have to wake up, I have to go do this thing I don't want to do, but that's my purpose. It's like you're just begging. I mean, you look, we are all on that conveyor belt towards a piece of property 7 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 6 feet deep. Everyone. There's no you can slow it down, okay? You can speed it up. You can definitely speed it up. You can jump off of it, but that gets you to the end right away, okay? But we're all headed there, every single one of us. And the sooner that you don't have a purpose that gets you up every single day and not like it, "Oh, I like gardening." Well, yeah, people say that. Most people say they like gardening, don't like it. It's kinda like how I say I like classical music, like, not really. But, you're gonna get to that piece of property that you really don't wanna get to sooner than you think when you retire.
Yeah,
And that's
and,
something
like
I've noticed. Oh, sorry?
no, 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 go ahead.
And that's something I've noticed about, like, Gen Z, and some millennials are waking up to it, and that is, "Okay, I'm gonna be working forever. I might as well find a job that I can tolerate." And it's on the one hand, yeah, you have a lot of Gen Z guys dropping out of the workforce. On the other hand, you're seeing the death of corporate life because it's just I never bought into the corporate crap, never. It was always just completely pointless. It was so transparently useless and meaningless, and so many people got into it. And so, I really do encourage people when you go for a job, go for something that you don't just absolutely hate, but something that you go, yeah, I can see myself doing this, for the foreseeable future. It's enjoyable, not enjoying, but enjoyable.
And I think that's one of the things that the older generation I mean, it's just put aside, the economy and all these other things. The oldest generation just refused to, like, hand over leadership or the reins in anything to and I'm even talking about, like, to Gen Xers and millennials at this point, like, put aside my generation, Z, like, certain older millennials are now just finally becoming, like, the leaders in society, whereas boomers were given the reins to things in, like, their early 30s, like, sometimes in their late 20s, as far as, like, being
Because
the
their
ones that
parents
were, like,
died off
really
so early.
well, yeah, and it's because and we have an inverted population pyramid, which we are establishing a society that is it's a geriatric society where the interests and resources of the young are effectively siphoned away to benefit the
Correct.
elongating the life of this massive older class that we have created. So people, like, all these old people are like, why don't the kids want their driver's license? Why don't the kids date anymore? It's like, well, there's nowhere to go and do any of those things. Like, why would a 16-year-old need his driver's license? There's nowhere to go and hang out. You can't, you're not allowed to go and loiter around places. The boomers like destroyed public places with diversity. And now
Yes.
and so you've this world you've like, all these boomers are complaining about Zoomers. It's like, they are a product of the world you created. Like,
Yeah.
that's exactly what's going on here. And I think at the end of the day, the something the next generation can really do is, look, I get young people are stupider than you. You were also stupid when you were young,
Yeah.
70-year-old man, just so you know. And
The hippie movement.
yeah, if anything, I'd say you were probably dumber. But the you need to be able to, you need to empower these young people. You need to, specifically Orthodox people in your church communities, you need to empower young people, enrich them. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes that literally means giving them money. Yep. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally, if you're someone with wealth in your community and you're not helping set people up with opportunities, investing in the community, like, you are part of the problem. Like, that's
Yeah.
just how it is. And I think a lot of older people, again, especially in light of all these prophecies and things that are going on right now, it would do a good turn to, and again, this brings it back to retirement. Like, just because you step down as CEO, for example, of your business, doesn't mean you're retiring, right? Like, you can hand things to the next generation. You can build things up. Like my grandfather, he doesn't work, like, he doesn't wage slave and go in, but he is not retired. You know what I mean? Like, he is not, like, he gets up and does work every single day. He maintains an office just to go and do things. But and that's then that, like you said, corporate America. Like,
Yeah.
the reason people feel the need to retire is because they're wage slaves. And if
Yeah,
you create,
absolutely.
and if you tell everybody that the goal and future is wage slavery, then of course people are going to fail to launch, because at a certain level, why wouldn't you rather just live with your parents and scroll on your phone? That's, you know what I mean? Like, is it really,
Yes, feels very
you're already,
hopeless.
you're not going to make that much money wage slaving anyway, based on wage stagnation. And if you're, and again, like, I recognize I've been able to start this business with World War Now because, but I'm a public speaker. I'm a precocious person. I like thinking about this stuff. This isn't an option for everybody to do. And then, we already have an oversaturation of content creators potentially anyway. So the
Yep.
idea that everyone can just everyone's like, oh, log on and do a business. Not everybody can do AI drop shipping and host a podcast and do these other things. We have to kind of create a society and create institutions where people can have fulfilling work and do these sorts of things. But unfortunately, like you said, everyone knows that they're not going to be able to, again, not retire as in like stop doing work and go on cruises like the boomers, but like, you're never going to like
Which sounds
advance at your,
miserable, by the way.
oh yeah, at your wage job. You're never going to like advance to the point where you can like, you're going to have any real power. You know what I mean? Like, you're either working for the man or you're unemployed, and that's really it. And it's a tough reality for a lot of guys. And women always and women want to complain about, oh, men don't make enough money, men need to step up and do this. It's like, well, your existence in the workforce is preventing that from happening. So
Yeah. I think a good rule of thumb is go into, instead of looking at what you can get per hour, look in terms of which skills you can develop on your way to starting your own business, because that's where real
mhm,
freedom comes from. And, I was talking to someone recently who they're looking to establish a parish, just sort of going on to the back to the topic about, or what you said about, in the parish community, setting people up. Okay. So it's really hard for young people to get their first job.
mhm.
It is, okay. One thing that I tell people, not around here because there's no lawns, but it's like, go get a loan from someone you know, buy a lawnmower, and start mowing lawns, because the fact is that the vast majority of people would way rather have someone who speaks English and who looks like them mow their lawn than some, like, really sketchy Guatemalan. And the other thing I hear from people constantly out here is, "Well, my yard maintenance guy just disappeared. What was his name?" It's always like Jose, like,
So yeah, well,
Juan,
he might have gotten
something like that.
deported.
Yeah, might have got deported, might just picked up and left. These guys have, like, I mean, they're not from here, and this is the thing about, you gotta have, when you have people who are not from here, and I'm guilty of this when I lived overseas. I didn't abandon place, I shouldn't say it, but, like, you're not invested in that place like people from there, who depend on the relationships in that community, and so you're gonna be a lot more reckless. Now, I wasn't, like, reckless, but of course, I wasn't invested in those places. I was just someone was passing through. I was gonna be gone in a year or 2 or 6 months, whatever. I was just, smelling the flowers, drinking the coffee, and learning the language, you know? So, but, someone I know, they're involved in establishing a mission, and the people who wanna establish this mission wanna buy dozens of acres of land and set up, this, like, birthing center and all this other stuff, and I'm like, "How about get a storefront and set up a church so that you're not borrowing the local Protestant church, odd times, have church in a box, okay? How about you set your aims on that, okay? And then 2, set up like a coffee stand that's associated with the church. And you can
Mhm.
start getting young people because even though they're like, 20 people now, okay, young people from the church, you can then hire them and they can start working there. Maybe it's 10 hours a week, maybe it's 15, something. It's something to get them involved and working. Now, of course, you have to be really careful with the church business because the moment that people realize the church is making money, you're gonna get attacked by the Skittles mafia who demand that you hire their, like, non-binary midget furry who carries around a Tickle Me Elmo doll that it touches in inappropriate ways while working, and then you're gonna get sued when you don't hire them. So you have to do this very surreptitiously. But you can provide jobs for people in your community through this. And I find that more often than not, the Orthodox communities, as tight knit as we are, we need to be much more tight knit, and we need to be much more. We need to do. I mean, people talk about outreach, but we need to be. How do I say this? We need to. We need smaller communities. We don't need larger churches. We need churches that are fairly small that can hold about 200 people, and that's it. And I'm
Mhm.
gonna tell you a story. I went to Father Josiah Trenum's parish, St. Andrew's, last Sunday. Beautiful music, beautiful church, okay? About 5 guys, I think, recognized me from the internet, came over, said hello. Franco, shout out to Franco, Peter, uh, what was the other guy's name? Samuel. The other guy, I can't remember his name, but he's tall, he had black hair, he's a cool guy. He had a really funny screen name that I'm not gonna say on screen, but, people walked over and said hello, but here's the thing, no one else came over. Only people who recognized me from the internet came and said hello. This is my first time there. No one came up and said, "Hey, is this, are you new here?" "Oh, is it," I mean, you might say, "Well, of course, it looks like you know what you're doing at church." Yeah, I do. I've been attending these services for 25 years. Okay, but no one came over and said, "Hey, I haven't seen you here before. My name's so and so. What's your name?" Just people who recognize me from the internet. And the reason is that there's probably 400 people in that church.
Mhm.
You just blend in. You just want how many missed opportunities have occurred because of large churches where the community, like the parish I was received into is St. Paul's and up in north of Seattle in Briar, Washington. It's an Antiochian church, very small, about maybe 100 people on a Sunday. Every single new person there stands out like a sore thumb, and people go over and say hello to that person right away and welcome them in. Okay, that's what you really need. Is you need
Mhm.
smaller communities where people really, really know each other. And that is going to be it's not building gigantic churches, it's gonna be small churches where people are building, uh, job networks for one another to hire each other, to shelter each other from, the Skittles mafia that
Well, and
just
you
runs society.
Yeah, and I think the point you make about the parish businesses, I've always been very in favor of them. I know there's a parish in Oregon, St. John of San Francisco, they have something like that operates, and there's many others, but, uh, one of the reasons and look, I'll be honest, like, I won't name any names, I've been in been Orthodox for, like, 7 years, I've been around the country, lived in different places, and there's a generation of priests that, like, when you say this, they, like, start to look at you like you're, like, an evil person, they're like, "Oh, you want us to become a cult, you want us to blah, blah, blah," and it's like, you start to realize that and Metropolitan Saba's been talking about this recently, how we need to ecclesiacize our lives. We
Yes.
really need to become Orthodox Christians. And it's so funny. These same boomer priests that extol the virtues of the cradles and the ethnic communities of the old world, and they're like, oh, us. They have this sort of fatalist attitude, like us white people will really never be as pious and holy as those people over there. It's like, well, you know what those people over there do? They're insular. They look out for their own people, and they take opportunities to build wealth wherever they can because they actually understand what it means to build the kingdom and to be in a society that doesn't appreciate you and to be persecuted and to be martyred. And we are just completely taking the cheese just because we're not getting beaten to death like the Russian new martyrs or people under the Turks. We think that we live in this amazing society that we can do whatever we want. So basically, half of these communities, you have half the people that don't even consider themselves part of it, really the Orthodox community. They go to church on Sunday, they consider themselves Orthodox, but they're Americans. They do all the normal stuff. And I'm not saying don't be American. I'm a proud American, but it's this complete refusal to sort of take it to that next level where the community is actually living life together. You don't just worship together on Sundays, hang out over some coffee. All right, bye. I send my kid to a different school. I go to work and see none of you, and that's it. Like that's I understand we're a minority and all these sorts of things, but we need Orthodox schools, we need Orthodox businesses, and we need people to be sort of attempting to live in community more so than they already are. And you start to say, oh, what, you want us to all move out to a place in the woods and all live together? And it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how America got set up, first of all. So to say that that's not American
Yeah.
is one thing. But again, I'm not saying we need to establish like insular cults, like, out in the middle of nowhere. But what did Elder Ephraim say? Elder Ephraim said he built the monasteries he built in America to be spiritual and even physical refuges for the American Orthodox Christians in the midst of persecution and calamity. And I think currently our parishes are not quite as prepared for that as they could be. Because think about it, if you have local businesses and you produce things within the community and everyone lives together and everyone sort of spends more and more time together in that way, your community just becomes so much more protected from, of course, the LGBT mafia, but also just the pernicious influence of secularism and urbanization on our society. I mean, what did Father Peter say? It's not ecumenism, it's not secularization, even necessarily these things that have been the biggest damage to the Orthodox Church. In Greece, at least, it's just urbanization. It's people leaving the village where you knew everybody and worshiped together and everyone functioned sort of as a unit. They leave the village and they went to the city and became a cosmopolitan person. And that's basically what most people are today. And again, it's just this attitude. It's these people that lived in the 20th century and they saw what the federal government did to Waco and the people up at Ruby Ridge, and they've heard the stories about Jonestown, that they literally think that the moment you stop having a normal one at church and start taking this seriously and trying to really advance in the spiritual life as a community, suddenly boomers start to get skittish.
Well, okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people are also afraid of hiring someone from their church community because what if the work isn't good? What if it
Yeah,
doesn't
then
work
it's
out?
awkward. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, well, this is just part of what everyone has dealt with in the past.
Yeah.
And it's like the sterilization. It's like why online dating is really popular with people. It's why one of the reasons why there's a dating crisis within the church is people go, well, what if the relationship sours and I have to go to church with this person? I've watched that happen a few times,
Mhm.
and the answer is nothing really. I mean, people get over it. We're not as tough as we used to be. We're not as resilient as people as we used to be, and so we're not used to the reality of how messy community life is. I mean, there's a trade-off in that the emotional health that you gain from living in a community and the feeling of safeness, but also yeah, sometimes things don't work out with other community members. I mean, I've been in parishes where it's like, look, you basically have a free electrician here, and they go and hire a company because, well, it's like, all right, all right,
Mhm. No, that happens
I've
all the
been
time, like, I mean, you hear the stories of boomers who sell their car to some dealership for a terrible price when they
I
could have
heard
offered it to their
about
kid.
that
Yeah,
last
it's
night.
like
Oh
your kid
my
would have bought it
god.
for more. It's like, think
Oh,
about
what was it? The dad had like 170,000 miles on like some Ford truck,
yeah, and he
and the
sold
thing
it
was
for,
in
like,
perfect shape.
7K or something to the dealer
He sold
or
it for
something, like
5K at the dealership, but his son would have bought it for 10.
yeah.
Oh my lord. The thing is that like my parents are boomers. I love boomers. My parents are great people. That being said, you know, the the characteristics that people find so agitating in boomers are really they're really immaturity is what they are.
Mhm.
That you find them it's an immaturity. And the boomers are basically just older millennials, you know, I'm a millennial. It's like it's that same sort of, "Well, I'm always 25." It's like, "Oh, no, you're not. Now you're 35, you're 40, you're 60, you're 80," you know? And the boomers really grew up in a society where things were just handed to them because the economy was going up, 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 and they had parents who had really great work ethics, and the population was expanding, and they had a great retirement set up for them because the population was expanding, and then because the government was just printing off money. And
Yeah, there was
so,
just other
yeah,
young people everywhere to meet all the time.
there you go. It was a largely homogenous country. It's there's real benefits to that. But they there's a real immaturity when you interact with them, and I interact with a lot of them. There's a real sort of it's not it there's definitely the, "Well, I've got mine," which is very immature, but there's very much this attitude of, "Well, I'm not my brother's keeper." It's like, "No, you are. You absolutely are. You are definitely responsible for people around you in a very real way." And I find that the boomers have grown up with this illusion of autonomy that only the wealth created by their parents allowed for the wealth and the systems set up by their parents allowed for this illusion to persist, because the reality is just how incredibly brutish and evil reality often is. We're
Mm,
shielded from it because of these systems. One of those being the system of trade networks. I mean, like I said about the trade ship, about the container ship going around the Pacific Rim. Very, very, very
mhm.
delicate systems. I mean, we still have not recovered from I mean, look at something as simple as, like, for me, like buying wire, okay, 12-2 wire. It's a wire that's used, at least in Nevada, for all your outlets in your house, any 20 amp circuit, okay, standard. Before COVID hit, I could buy one of those for about $90 for a 250-foot roll. COVID hit, the lockdowns occurred, and that stuff that was produced in Mexico and copper from Chile, this thing was made in Mexico, Romex, went up to about $245 from 90 to
Wow.
245. Okay. It went down before the tariffs to about 110 after COVID. And then the tariffs hit, now it's back up about 160. That's not something shipped in from China. That's not something shipped in through the Straits of Hormuz. That's something shipped in from Mexico. I mean, that's how delicate these systems are. I
Mhm.
remember being up in Seattle, and for a while, I just said, "Look, I'm not even gonna do small jobs," because you end up having to go to several different suppliers to get things and then sort of jerry rig things together to do it because we were so short on supplies and key things. It was ridiculous. Jobs were shelved because people couldn't get supplies. All right.
Mm.
As you pointed out, they opened the strategic reserves in the US, so we're not getting hit as hard as we would with the oil shocks. Okay, what happens when the strategic reserves runs out or gets really low? Gas goes up to
Shortages.
9, $10 a gallon, you know? And I mean, you wanna talk about what's gonna start a war, like, shortage, I mean, and that affects everything, where you ship everything. I mean, we just drove back from San Diego, and I point out to my kids, "Look at all these semi trucks on the road." People do not realize how many things that we use are shipped by land from one center to another,
Mhm.
and that all depends on fuel.
Yeah, I mean, the prophecies of the saints talk extensively about fuel shortages, and again, we live in America, I live in Texas. Without cars, like, there's, like, one convenience store that's in, like, reasonable, like, walking distance from my house, and I live in
Oh,
the
same
city, I live
here.
in the suburbs, and it's just it's not sustainable. And back to the prophecies, for example, a lot of the prophecies talk about how Greece and Cyprus in many ways will be safer during all of this, because even though they'll be closer to the war, the Turks will pull out and they'll be fighting people elsewhere. And you almost, living somewhere like Cyprus, where it's a smaller island in general, it might be like a better situation than where we are in the midst of all of this, because again, very bad things are prophesied for the United States. But we were talking about the boomers, and yeah, they misunderstood. I mean, all this stuff is completely accurate, but even outside of America, the generations of the 20th century fundamentally failed in transmitting the faith and the traditions of their ancestors to the next generation. And there's a prophecy about this. I think it's St. Paisios, Metropolitan Neophytos, recounts it. He says that in Greece, even in these other places, when all these fateful events are occurring, they will, I forget the exact language, but they will be not cursing, but they will be angry at their parents, and they'll be saying, "Why did you not teach us about the Panagia? Why did you not teach us about the faith of our fathers? Why did you not teach us about Holy Orthodoxy?" And sure, in America, my ancestors were not Orthodox, and my parents, I really exclude my parents from my criticisms of the boomers and other things, but in many ways, the failure of the boomers to transmit anything to the next generation here, it is sort of serving a purpose of helping orthodoxy in that way, because it would be a lot harder, I think, for orthodoxy to grow if there was some strong Anglo Episcopalian Protestant culture in America that was still really really holding strong. But the past 40 years of American Christianity has been this evangelicalism, and and that's allowed people to kind of realize the truth of orthodoxy. And again, when all of this warfare is done and these prophecies occur, and again the Marble Emperor comes back, orthodoxy is going to be preached around the world. And I mean, even Saint Paisios said it. He said one day America, maybe he said, will be holy, but whether that is, I think that means through a lot of persecution. Because what did Seraphim Rose translate at the front of their book on the Catacomb Saints? He says, "This book is dedicated to the new martyrs of Russia today." In Russia, tomorrow in America, right? So that's something that we undoubtedly have to look towards. But look at Russia today. I mean, the Russian church they've restored tens of thousands of churches across the Russian world since the fall of since the Soviet Union fell, and they've been rebuilding it. And what do they say? The blood of the martyrs waters the seeds of the church. So what we're seeing today in Russia couldn't have happened without the brutal persecution of the Soviet Union. And in many ways, what we're about to experience with these shortages, these supply chain shocks, I think natural disasters when it comes to America are very much on the table, combined with the Third World War that's going to be fought in Eurasia. I think in many ways we are seeing another round of this persecution, so that the church can reemerge again, potentially before the Antichrist himself, with the rebuilding of the temple.
Do you think that we are in World War III right now?
I do. I think I agree largely. Metropolitan Neophytos, he said that when the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he said we were actually then in the second year of the Third World War. He said COVID was actually the beginning of the Third World War. But I agree with that. I think when Russia invaded Ukraine, the Third World War really effectively began. Some people have said the Third World War began. Actually, Elder Joseph of Vatopedi, big section about him in this book, he reposed in, I believe, 2011. He discusses how the Third World War actually started in 2008 in Georgia. He considers that the beginning of the Third World War. And he has a whole section in here that explains how the Third World War will be fought in these there will be a big round of fighting, and then there will stop, and then there'll be another big round of fighting. He sort of discusses how it will go this way. And he even, some of his prophecies, maybe I should find it and read them directly, because this might be a window into our future about, I literally opened it directly to the page that it's on. Glory to God. He said the Russians, he said the Americans will have occupied Iran's coastal zone after a fierce struggle, but they will not be able to advance inland due to the strong resistance they will face. The Russians will sweep through and destroy American and NATO forces. They will invade Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and reach Israel. This is when the first attempt to use nuclear weapons by the U.S. and Israel will occur. The Russians will neutralize them. There was earlier in this section, it says an attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent. It goes on to talk about the situation with the Russians and NATO and attacking Turkey. But again, this is something that we see, the Iranian coastal deployments that have existed. Trump just this week talked about taking Karg Island. So the words of Elder Joseph about the PD were so specific regarding Iran, we might very much see that come to pass. So yes, I believe we're in the middle of the Third World War, and I don't think the Third World War is necessarily about to end anytime soon. And again, I've said it before, and I'll reiterate: the next big sign we're looking for is the fall of Erdogan, I believe. And between that and the Greek elections that are coming supposedly this fall, the Greeks have said that the plan was to have elections 2027, but between leaks and sort of interesting analysis, it's basically admitted that they're going to be holding elections in the fall of this year. And there are prophecies that say that after Erdogan falls and when the Greek islands are invaded by the Turks, there will basically be the Greek government will basically collapse and end, and new people will kind of rise up and take over. And I mean, if any country needs a new government, it's Greece. I mean, becoming the first country to legalize gay marriage, being in the debt slavery that they are, and just, I mean, moving forward with it. I mean, St. Paisios prophesied about the ID cards in Greece that are currently being implemented that combine all of your data and everything. So I think we are deep into World War III at this point. I'd say about 4 years in minimum, or even longer, 20 years almost, if you ask Elder Joseph about the PD. But think about it. What did Marshall, I don't know if you've read Marshall McLuhan, but what did he say about the Third World
No,
War? He said that the Third World War is a guerrilla information war with no distinction between civilian or military participation. So, and he's the father of media studies, famous scholar. And so I think in many ways the info war in the post-war era has, the Third World War has almost always been being fought in the realm of propaganda and these other things. But when it comes to the actual ground war, yeah, 2008 potentially, but really 2022, it's been one of the hotter phases of the Third World War. And Metropolitan Jovitos, he said when the Russian invasion happened, he said, we're in the second year of the Third World War, but they just don't want to tell us this. And it's true. I mean, were they calling it World War II when Germany invaded Austria, during the Anschluss? No, they were hoping, okay, they invaded Austria, let's, hold this back, and if they start calling it the Third World War, that doesn't really benefit the current status quo system, because then people are starting to get the ideas of, oh, a new system might emerge, or something might come about this, and then people in local domestic countries will be like, oh, maybe there's a power vacuum here, maybe we can use this to our advantage. And so that's why they're never gonna, people I think are waiting, like one day they're gonna turn on CNN and it's gonna be like World War III has begun. It's that's never gonna happen. Like,
even during World War I, they called it the Great War.
Yeah, and that didn't really develop until they were all, the trenches had been built, and they were up until some of the biggest battles that people were still trying to put the cat back in the bag here. And I think with all of these things, this summer, I think we're really going to see the tale told when it comes to Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. And again, there have been elders that are alive today that have reached people that I know and trust very well, that has said that it's very likely that sometime this year, even as soon as August, September 2026, that Erdogan could be shot down coming back from Libya or Syria in his jet, one of these places. And remember, this is an angle I want people to think about, that obviously people consider Turkey invading Greece, Erdogan falls, these Kemalists come to power. Remember, Greece holds military exercises with Israel. Like, Greece and Cyprus are very close in with the Zionists these days. So there's a reality where Turkey takes these Greek islands, and they are, again, I look at this all from a realpolitik perspective. There's no good guys and bad guys, really. The only good guys are the Christians and God. But when it comes to invading Greece, I mean, what if Turkey's invading Greece because Israel shoots Erdogan's jet down from a Greek island? Think about these different contingencies. Like, the Turks could be the good guys, for lack of a better word, when this begins. But I think that's one of the main things I love about St. Paisios' prophecies is he himself understood kind of the reality of geopolitics. He talks about, and there's a perfect interesting contingency. He talks about how the Russians taking Constantinople will have nothing to do with helping Greece, and it will entirely be for their own geopolitical interests. Eldris Galactia, who died in 2021, I have a picture of her over in my icon corner, she says that there will be a sort of brotherly Orthodox motivation partially behind Russia moving in to Turkey to help Greece. And people say, oh, so these two prophecies contradict each other. Not so. I think one of these prophecies is about a better case scenario where Russia truly does embrace Orthodoxy, because again, in a lot of these prophecies about Russia, there are prophecies from Saint Seraphim Soloviev in the 20th century, who said that if Russia doesn't re-embrace Orthodoxy and basically return to monarchy and get a new czar, China, and if they return to communism, China will take all of Siberia. And so you have this contingency within Russia itself. Russia is still deciding if it wants to be this sort of multipolar kind of crypto communists kind of anti-Western state, or if it wants to embrace its Orthodox heritage and be a true Orthodox civilization state. I mean, look, Putin's been in power for over 20 years at this point. The idea that they couldn't handle a monarch is silly. They could handle a
Yeah.
monarch. They could easily deal with this. There are a lot of people in Russia that I've met, a lot of the top monarchists in Russia. It's a serious political force there in a lot of ways, but ultimately there's still no succession plan in Russia. So when it comes to a lot of these prophecies, will Russia be going in as sort of an Orthodox civilization state, or will they be going in as this sort of whatever they're trying to do, right now, as they still sort out their identity? And there are prophecies that say that St. John Baptist, when he emerges from the ruins of Constantinople, the Russian fleet will be in the Black Sea. They're in the Sea of Marmara, and he will move his hand, and they'll be completely swamped and overwhelmed, and then the fleet will be destroyed. So I think there's a lot of contingencies here based on Russia's repentance as a civilization, based on Greece's and the Orthodox people their civilization, and even based on our repentance here in America, based on the hardships that we are going to face with these natural disasters. So people need to recognize it's not me coming on here every day and saying, oh, the based Russians are going to take Constantinople for the based Greeks against the cringe
Yeah.
Turks. Like that's not what's happening here. This is like much deeper at a civilizational level that I think that's one big thing I love about my show. I consider sort of I think if people listen to my show, I try to convince people sort of older world Weltanschauung, like back in the day, before modernity, before the post-war epoch, before all of this stuff, people cared a lot more about signs and portents, and the idea
Yes.
of going to a bearded old man on Mount Athos that prays to ask his opinion, to hear what he has to say about these things. That goes against the modern consensus and the modern mind. But I think that's an important barrier we have to get over as Orthodox people. And look, go to Greece. These people are not apolitical. You talk to Greeks, they love politics. They'll talk to
Oh yeah.
what's the saying?
Yeah.
What's the sayings? They say the Greeks are the best at talking about politics, but the worst at doing it. I think that's what
Yeah.
the
Well,
saying is.
it's
And
what I want to know is this from the audience. I want to know if you guys agree with what Mr. France here is saying. I mean, because he's made some statements that are, some would say inflammatory. I would say at least semi-controversial, even for more right-wing people. I want to know from you guys, is this something that you agree with? What are flaws that you see in his argument? What are strengths you see in it? I want you to post those below in the comments. And the reason is that Mr. France and I, we will be, Mr. Conrad France, sorry, he and I, if you have good comments, we'll interact with them. We will. So make sure your comments are good and spam the comment section here. That also helps us out because, as mentioned, Conrad is shadow banned by YouTube. And by having him on, this video will very likely be shadow banned as well. But when you do things like comment below, it works the algorithm in our favor. It really does. I mean, YouTube is
you
being
are the
invaded.
algorithm. You are our algorithm.
Yeah, you got. I mean, I hear people go, "Oh, this show's criminally underrated," and I go, um, "Yeah, leave a few more comments." It's, "Oh, criminally underrated." Yeah, leave a few more comments. Every time you click like on a comment, every time you subscribe, and remember, ring that bell. Only 6% of you, 6% of subs are actually signed up for notifications. When you sign up for notifications, when you comment below, when you interact with other people's comments, when you click like on comments, all of those things play the algorithm in our favor. Those are all tokens that the algorithm looks at and goes, oh, people enjoy this video. I should promote it to more people. 70% of views, 70%, 70, come from YouTube saying someone enjoys the video. Therefore, I will promote it to more people. Right? So let us know what you think in the comments below. What you think of Conrad's arguments, what he's saying, if you agree, disagree, if you think there are flaws in it, if you think there are strengths in it, let us know what you think of what I'm saying. Yeah, right. But with that, Conrad, is there anything that you want to wrap up with? Anything you want to plug?
Definitely want to plug again the Substack. The link's been on the screen the whole time. Thank you so much for keeping that up there. That's
The
our
least I
home
can
base.
do.
You mentioned the shadow banning. Look, you go to our YouTube channel. We've got 7,000 subscribers. our videos on YouTube used to consistently get 2,000 views or so. They've been hitting us down, and like the people look at us like, your channel's not popular. Well, if you go to Substack, we get about 6 to 10,000 views on every episode on Substack. So
Yeah,
you can go check that out. That's one of the
there
best
you
ways
go.
to check it out. And Substack's great because you sign up via email and you can turn off email notifications whenever you want, but every episode just gets sent directly into your inbox, including, even if you're not a paid subscriber, the free previews of our paid episodes. Again, every week we do a paid show where we have a guest on or we discuss something deep about geopolitics. I mean, we have extensive, deep historical episodes about the history of the Levant, the history of the Russian Empire. We have an episode all about Ivan Grozny. We just finished a 3-part series with my good friend Alex from Rasputin Archive, all about the truth about Rasputin. So really the most insightful resource that currently exists in the English language about Rasputin. We have all of that. We have a translated documentary that Metropolitan Tikhon of Crimea gave us permission to subtitle in the English language, all about the fall of the Russian Empire. All of this is available to paid subscribers on the Substack at worldwarnow.co. Obviously, we're on Twitter as well at worldwarnow_. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are found. But yeah, Substack is the home base, worldwarnow.co.
And by the way, Conrad said Ivan Grozny. It's more commonly known in the West as Ivan the Terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Grozny means like awe-inspiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
What about if people want to reach you? Is Twitter the easiest way?
Yeah, Twitter is a good way to reach me. Obviously, we have an email, worldwarnowmedia@gmail.com. Don't spam that with like questions. Just if you have like an inquiry about, guests and, guests and other things, we check that email, obviously. We also have a Discord server. I can send Ubi the link towards that. We have a server on Discord where I'm in there talking to people a lot. If you're a paid subscriber, you get access to a few exclusive Discord channels as well that I try to be more active in and talk to people. So you can talk to me on the Discord. You can find me on Twitter at gnome, like GNOME, like a garden gnome, RAD. That's my username on Twitter. And if you message me on Substack as well, I'll usually answer
it's
those
linked
as well.
in the video description.
Substack has a DM message feature.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
You're good.
I've linked in the video description. I've linked Conrad's X account and Substack as well as and World War Now X account. It's great stuff, by the way. I've been listening to it. Dimitri is one smart guy.
Yeah, you should have him on next. He's anonymous, so he doesn't come on camera, but you should do a show with him too.
Okay, all right. I have a for reasons that are obvious to anyone who's followed the channel. I have a soft spot for anonymous people.
Yeah. Yes.
I can
tell it was a big deal when you revealed your face, Danny. I was like, wow, that was a big deal. I was, I never thought it would happen.
Yeah, if you go back and read that, if you go read the live chat from that debate, I showed my face and people started going, "He's Chad."
Yeah. I think you started out debating Eric Ibarra. I think people just sort of like, I think just a psychological thing. People just sort of filled in a other Eric Ibarra type figure on the other side. So, so I think they just sort of pictured Eric Ibarra when they thought of you. Cause you know what I mean? Like it was the video was not you and he was on the camera. So then when they come on, like, oh, he doesn't look like Eric Ibarra.
Yeah. He was huge when I met him. I mean,
credit to him. He's lost a lot of weight. So God
is he still losing it?
I think so. Yeah.
Or is he fallen off the wagon or rolled off the wagon? Sorry. I mean, if he is, great, good on him. I mean, it's when you have kids, you can't be that fat. You got to be around for them. Well, it's embarrassing to the kids too. For your health, you got to live long and be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
But good for him. All right. $20 from Bingo Foxtrot. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Appreciate it tremendously. Didn't even ask a question. And then we got Jake here. Jake's a good guy. I know him in real life. He's a boxer, actually. Wish I could ask an insightful question, but I'm just barely tuning in. Jake, all your questions are insightful. All of them. He's a good guy. Good guy. Great guy. Amazing guy. Okay. Anything else, Conrad?
No. Again, I just if people like what they hear, again, we'll have Ubi on the show here probably in the next few weeks. We're booked for the next 2 weeks, but maybe after that we'll work something out. So hopefully this will be the start of a beautiful friendship and collaboration. But
it's already is.
Oh yeah. Worldwarnow.co, that's the home base. Go to the YouTube channel as well. That's probably the main way people watch the live streams, just because there's no super chat feature on Substack yet or Twitter. So I answer every super chat question on the Tuesday evening live streams, which is at 7:45 p.m. Central Time. So if you liked this format, if you like chatting in the live chat and sending super chats, I'm live every Tuesday evening. So would love to see y'all there.
Absolutely. And all of those links can be found in the video description. And one last time here, I'm going to try and get this link up for so you guys can see the. I got to find it somewhere. I can't find it. But yeah,
Worldwarnow.co. Just type it right in just like that.
worldwarnow.co. Worldwarnow.co. I'm going to leave my own comment in there. Oh, we got one here. We got another super chat. Wonderful chat, gentlemen. Random question, but I was wondering if Conrad has any book recommendations on Russian history.
I do have a book recommendation on Russian history. It's on my bookshelf in my living room, so I wish I could go grab it, but it would be a bit of a rush. It's called The Land of the Firebird by Suzanne Massey, and I highly recommend everybody read it. It's a very incredible book. Other books for Russia, I recommend reading A Reflection of a Russian Statesman by Konstantin Pobedonostov, one of the best political kind of articulations of monarchist and autocratic thought. But yeah, Land of the Firebird is incredible from Suzanne Massey. Also, The Romanov Royal Martyrs, What Silence Could Not Conceal, is an incredible book about the life and martyrdom of the Romanov royal family. So those are probably the three books I would recommend most as far as Russia goes.
Excellent. Yeah, I read some Russian history when I was doing those videos on the history of Orthodox missions.
Yeah,
And
those were great.
yeah, oh, thank you. Tragic history of Russia. I mean, just very.
Mhm.
I mean, I mean, I'd say they're resilient, but that gives the impression that Russians are really joyous people. They're kind of somber. I mean, they are joyous when you get to know them. They're very, they're never in the middle on things. They're either,
Oh yeah,
very,
when
somber. They're very happy. They're very, they're
they think
very,
we're smiling, they think we're like smiling retards all the time. I'm walking around Russia like, and
yeah,
everyone's like, "What are you doing, man?" Like,
yeah, yeah. They're very. All right, great guys. Remember, click that bell for notifications so you know what's going on. Visit Conrad's channel, linked in the video description. I am teaching Latin, Greek, and Syriac online. I'm trying to see if there are people who want to do Coptic and Arabic as well. I was thinking about adding those, teaching those via Patreon. Let me know if you're interested. My email is in the video description as well. You can check that and reach out to me if you're interested in those languages. And I just had the fourth video come out, fourth of 4 on the history of the Nestorians. This month will be another video responding to Eric Ibarra's book on the papacy. And yeah, okay. All right. Conrad, it has been a tremendous honor having you on. I am super stoked about coming onto your channel. Simply tell me when. When you call, I will answer. I like Conrad enough that I gave him my phone number.
mm,
So he will be contacting me. We'll be setting that up. Okay. Guys, it's been great. Conrad, it's been excellent. You have an excellent weekend. Guys, go attend liturgy, do your morning, evening prayers, follow the fast, stay off of social media as much as humanly possible, and
thanks, Danny.
exercise a lot. All right. Thank you, Conrad. You take care.
Thanks, Danny. It's been an honor.
It's been an honor for me too.